Nanette Krentel grew up in New Orleans in a humble, close-knit family. Her parents, Dan and Pat Watson, raised her along with her siblings Kim, Eliza, and 3 half-siblings and taught her important values of loyalty and kindness, known for her gentle and caring nature. Nanette had a deep love for animals and shared her home with 2 cats and a dog. Despite moving away, she maintained a close bond with her family, especially her father and sisters, speaking with them daily. In 1994, at 27 years old, Nanette met Steve Krentel while applying for a job at his office supply store. Steve, then 28, owned both a scuba gear business and the store, and was going through a divorce at the time. Their professional relationship soon turned romantic, and after Steve finalized his divorce, he introduced Nanette to his young son, Justin. By 1995, they were married. Steve's native of Louisiana. He grew up near Lacombe and reportedly had a tense relationship with his brother, Brian. In 2000, Steve and Nanette moved to Lacombe, closer to his parents. He gradually worked his way up in the Tammany Parish Fire Department, eventually becoming the fire chief. Respected for his professionalism, his career in the fire department provided him with financial security and influence in the community. In 1997, after Steve sold both of his businesses, Nanette shifted her career path. She began working at a daycare center, where her kind and attentive nature earned the trust of parents and co-workers. Beyond her job, she became involved in the community, organizing fundraisers and charitable events, as well as supporting local fire departments by selling handmade ceramics and baked goods. By 2017, she had been out of the workforce for several years, focusing instead on her home, her pets, and continued community involvement. Although she had no children, Nanette was always concerned and attentive to the lives of her loved ones. She often played a central role in family matters, offering emotional and financial support to her loved ones. To outsiders, she and Steve seemed to lead a peaceful life, residing on 100 acres of scenic remote property in Lacombe. However, behind closed doors, Nanette grew increasingly concerned for her safety after Steve's brother, Brian, was released from prison. Brian allegedly blamed Nanette for the legal issues that led to his incarceration and had made direct threats against her. In response, she urged for additional security measures, having cameras installed around the property and keeping protective tools in her bedroom, car, and purse. She openly shared her fears with her family. Her father and sisters, aware of the escalating tension, were alarmed but did not anticipate just how grave the situation would become. Steve was also concerned and worked with Nanette to increase security. He installed additional cameras, purchased self-defense equipment, and even practiced shooting with her at a local shooting range. However, despite these precautions, the simmering problems in their family did not go away. Behind the facade of a peaceful life, there were bitter family conflicts, growing tensions, and the choices ahead led to unforeseen consequences. On July 14, 2017, at around 2:30 p.m., the St. Tammany Parish Fire Department received an urgent call from Steve's cousin, who lived nearby. He reported seeing thick smoke rising from Steve's property and suspected the house was on fire. Despite the distance between their homes and the dense forest in between, the fire was visible from afar. Steve and his team arrived at the scene around 3 p.m. when the house was engulfed in flames. Firefighters worked into the evening to extinguish the fire, only to discover human remains in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The damage was extensive, but the location of the remains and the fact that no one else lived there indicated the victim was likely Nanette, Steve's wife. No alarms had sounded, and throughout the day, Steve's repeated calls to both Nanette's cell phone and the house landline had gone unanswered. Her car remained in the garage, further confirming she had been home at the time of the fire. Tragically, all the household pets also perished, reflecting the sudden and intense nature of the flames. Federal fire investigation specialists joined the inquiry. Initially, the fire was considered a possible accident, but the circumstances surrounding Nanette's death raised suspicions. Her remains were found in the bathroom, and there was no indication she had tried to escape. This prompted a forensic autopsy, which included DNA testing and an investigation into the cause of death. About a week later, during a memorial service, part of the coroner's preliminary findings became public. It was revealed that Nanette had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, with a bullet found in her skull. This discovery completely shifted the direction of the investigation. On July 18th, the sheriff confirmed the findings, apologized for the delay in communication, and acknowledged evidence of a criminal act. Further autopsy results showed no smoke inhalation in Nanette's lungs, proving that she had died before the fire. Since no weapon was found near her body, the possibility of self-inflicted injuries has been ruled out. The investigation further revealed the presence of 9 security cameras on the property, but Steve stated that the system had stopped functioning several days before the fire. Efforts to recover footage from the damaged equipment were unsuccessful. This lack of evidence, combined with forensic findings, suggested the fire had been intentionally set to destroy evidence. Investigators shifted their focus to individuals who might have had both motive and access to the property. However, an official statement confirming foul play in Nanette's death was not released until 4 days after the fire. The family's frustration with the investigation grew, particularly because the coroner had noted the gunshot wound the day after the incident, yet this information wasn't immediately shared with them. Nanette's sister, Kim, a prosecutor in Nebraska, publicly criticized the investigation, pointing to the lack of proper scene containment, which may have compromised evidence. When Nanette's relatives arrived in Louisiana shortly after the tragedy, they found the property unsecured and the house open. Within 2 days, Steve was allowed to return to the site, raising concerns about evidence being altered or lost. It wasn't until Steve's son, Justin, discovered a fragment of a human skull in the debris that authorities finally secured the scene. The incident has left the public losing confidence in Sheriff Randy Smith's department. While federal investigators conduct an independent analysis, they discovered multiple points of ignition and traces of accelerants, confirming the fire was deliberately set. Despite these findings, however, the sheriff did not rule out the possibility that Julie harmed herself, citing the lack of a recovered weapon and inconclusive ballistics test results. Later, 2 firearms were found in the remains of the home, but neither could be definitively linked to the fatal shot. The bullet recovered from Nanette's skull was too damaged for reliable analysis. Additional forensic tests reinforced previous findings, including finding no smoke in Nanette's lungs and no food in her stomach. Despite her having been seen purchasing food at a fast food restaurant that morning, additional inconsistencies came to light during the investigation. There was no blood on Nanette's gunshot wound to the head, as is often the case, leading to speculation that her body may have been moved after her death. An independent expert suggested that whoever moved her was likely familiar with the layout of the house. The sheriff, however, publicly disputed the forensic expert's conclusions. This discrepancy with the findings of federal agents further undermined public confidence in the investigation. Nanette's family began openly questioning the integrity of local authorities and raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest. As discrepancies mounted, the sheriff was eventually compelled to issue a public statement, acknowledging that Nanette's death resulted from a violent act. Despite this admission, the investigation failed to identify the person responsible. The case shifted towards exploring possible motives and suspects with access to the property. Nanette's husband, Steve, was naturally a key subject of interest due to his unrestricted access to the house. He willingly cooperated, volunteered for a polygraph test, and passed. However, since polygraph results are not entirely reliable, investigators didn't eliminate him as a suspect. Steve's alibi was backed by fire department security footage confirming he was at work on the day of the incident, starting at 8 a.m., and didn't leave at any point, including during lunch. This was corroborated by surveillance footage and his co-workers' testimonies. However, it was noted that Steve working on a Friday was unusual, as he usually took that day off. Investigators also analyzed Nanette's movements on the morning of July 14th. Traffic cameras spotted her driving between her home and a nearby fast food restaurant, where her bank card was used to buy food. Her car was later seen near her house. About an hour later, a phone call was made from Nanette's phone to an unfamiliar number. The person on the other end claimed not to know her, and the reason for the call remains unexplained. Investigators explored potential personal conflicts and discovered that Steve had been in an extramarital relationship with a colleague. Nanette was aware of the affair and had told others she was considering divorce, which under state law would involve dividing their shared assets, an arrangement that could have been financially disadvantageous for Steve. When questioned, Steve admitted to the affair but claimed the couple had reconciled and planned to stay together. Close family members were also questioned. Steve's son, Justin, had reportedly experienced tension with his stepmother, Julie. In the past, family acquaintances described him as having unusual interests, including a fascination with firearms. However, Justin provided documentation proving he was out of state for work on the day of the incident, which was verified, ruling him out as a suspect. Investigators also looked into Steve's brother, Brian, who had a criminal record and a history of family conflicts. Over the years, Nanette had voiced concerns about his behavior. Shortly after his release from prison, she sent her sister a message describing a specific threat from him, in which he allegedly displayed aggressiveness and hinted at setting the house on fire. These claims were corroborated through their text exchanges. Surveillance footage from their parents' home showed Brian did not leave the premises on the day of Nanette's death. However, a wearable tracking device issued to him malfunctioned and failed to record any location data that day, with the cause of this failure unexplained. Another puzzling incident occurred a month before Nanette's death. A security camera recorded an unidentified man near the entrance gate of the property. He left behind a cigarette butt and a knife. Nanette informed her father about the incident, but the man's identity remained unclear and no investigation was conducted to find out more. After investigating multiple leads, the case remained unsolved. Every suspect either had a confirmed alibi or there wasn't enough evidence to make a formal accusation, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 2 months after Nanette's death, the sheriff made another public announcement. He declared that Steve was no longer a person of interest in the case, explaining that Steve's alibi had been verified. There was no clear motive, and the evidence was deemed insufficient to move forward. However, Nanette's family felt this announcement was premature, as not all digital records had been reviewed. Several witnesses had yet to be re-interviewed, and a detailed timeline of her phone activity leading up to her death was still incomplete. It appeared the investigation was entering a state of stagnation. When Nanette's family requested access to the case documents, their attempts were met with vague responses. Louisiana state law restricts access to investigative materials to the closest next of kin, which in this case was Steve, not Nanette's parents or sisters. Steve did not share these documents with the rest of the family. In search of answers, Nanette's relatives turned to private attorneys and independent forensic experts. One expert, after examining the available evidence, identified signs of deliberate investigative mismanagement, noting that critical protocols for handling cases involving violent deaths and burnt evidence had been disregarded. The conclusions and methodologies of the private experts sharply contrasted with those of the local authorities. Efforts to transfer the case to a different jurisdiction proved unsuccessful. Appeals to the district attorney's office were dismissed, with officials citing a lack of legal justification to relocate the investigation. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Nanette's family turned to social media, launching a page to provide updates and highlight inconsistencies in the investigation, in the hope of pressuring authorities into action. However, the sheriff's actions became a significant obstacle to achieving transparency. His public statements, dismissal of expert findings, and personal connections to individuals potentially linked to the case raised concerns about his impartiality and deepened public mistrust. Despite multiple individuals with potential motives, the investigation failed to reach a definite conclusion. Detectives worked on verifying alibis, analyzing technical records, and identifying gaps in the official narrative. But these efforts often revealed inconsistencies that undermined the credibility of the evidence. A key issue was the absence of location data from the Jeep's-enabled ankle monitor worn by Brian. On July 14th, the day of the incident, the monitor registered no location data, an unexplained blackout. Authorities were unable to determine whether the failure was a technical error or whether the monitor had been intentionally disabled. This missing data represented a major accountability failure and raised serious questions. Another troubling discovery came from a review of footage from a security camera inside Brian's parents' home. The video depicted Brian with a working desk lamp and a visible wall clock in the background, ostensibly providing an alibi. However, Nanette's family questioned the authenticity of this footage, suggesting it could have been pre-recorded or staged. Experts also observed that the angle and focus of the camera appeared unusual for a standard household surveillance setup. Additional uncertainty arose with surveillance footage from a fast food establishment showing Nanette's vehicle. Investigators assumed she was driving the car that morning, but the video quality was too poor to verify her identity. This assumption was based solely on her bank card being used to make a purchase nearby. The situation was further complicated by the fact that there was no footage from her home surveillance system on the day of the incident. Steve claimed the cameras had not been operational at the time, but investigators later found traces of accelerant on the damaged equipment. Experts concluded that the security system had likely been intentionally tampered with before the fire, suggesting someone with knowledge of the camera's locations and purpose had interfered. After Nanette's father passed away, her sisters took the lead in demanding a proper investigation. They launched an online awareness campaign, collaborated with advocacy groups, and participated in discussions on crime-focused platforms. The family repeatedly urged state authorities to transfer the case to an independent investigative body, but their requests were consistently met with generic responses that lacked meaningful action. They were also frustrated by the investigators' failure to review footage from the citywide surveillance system, which could have offered critical context. These shortcomings formed the basis of formal complaints to the district attorney's office. Although officials promised to keep the case open, there was no evidence of real progress, receiving minimal support from local law enforcement. Nanette's family shifted their focus to building a network of allies. They connected with organizations specializing in unresolved cases, which led to increased attention on Nanette's death through podcasts, videos, and media coverage. By 2024, the case remained unsolved. However, new hope appeared when Colin Sims was elected district attorney. Colin publicly expressed his willingness to review the evidence, marking the first sign of possible investigative progress after nearly 7 years of inaction. As of March 2024, Nanette's case was still open, with no charges filed against any suspects. Despite coroner findings, witness testimonies, and independent assessments, authorities in St. Tammany Parish had yet to identify any responsible parties. What initially seemed like a straightforward case had instead devolved into a prolonged stalemate. By mid-2025, the case records were still sealed, and only individuals with legal standing, such as Nanette's husband, Steve, were granted access. The family remained barred from reviewing complete investigative reports, transcripts, or relevant surveillance data. Repeated appeals to state authorities went unanswered. In response, a grassroots group formed by Nanette's friends and family continued to provide social media updates, urging the public to come forward with any useful information. The family also sought assistance from federal agencies like the Department of Justice. In their letters, they raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest involving local authorities and petitioned for the case to be transferred to a higher jurisdiction. Independent experts consulted by the family identified numerous investigative avenues that had not been fully explored, including recovering deleted digital records and re-interviewing key witnesses. However, without official investigative authority, these proposals could not be enforced. Despite years of stagnation, Nanette's family has never stopped fighting for answers. For them, this is about more than personal grief. It is a pursuit of justice. The lack of progress has only strengthened their resolve. They firmly believe the truth can still be uncovered if independent expertise is brought in and the case is reviewed impartially. As of this report, the case remains open but inactive. Nanette Krentel's story highlights how errors, delays, and possible bias can obstruct justice in a major case. Yet, it also demonstrates the unwavering resilience of a family determined to keep her memory alive. Their goal remains unchanged: to uncover the truth, no matter how much time has passed or how many obstacles stand in their way.
Kitzbühel is a small Austrian town located with a population of just over 8,000 people. Despite its size, more than 20,000 tourists visit every winter, drawn by the local mountain slopes. For many decades, this place has been known as a winter resort for the wealthy. Additionally, there are numerous celebrations that attract athletes and fans from around the world. Since October 2018, the ski slopes have been prepared before the winter season. The hotels and tourism companies have been making the final preparations to welcome numerous guests. However, the joyful events were overshadowed by the horrific murders. Nadine Hinterholzer was born in Austria, grew up in a close-knit family. From an early age, she was energetic, cheerful, and quite pretty. She had a large circle of friends who loved her for her straightforwardness, good sense of humor, and pleasant demeanor. Nadine lived with her parents and older brother in a spacious house in Kitzbühel. At the age of 14, significant changes began in her life when she met a guy named Andreas E., who was 20 at the time. He already looked like an adult, while she was still a teenager. A 6-year age difference at that age can seem significant. Despite this, they felt a mutual attraction. After several dates, they began a romantic relationship in secret from Nadine's relatives. Eventually, they both realized that age could pose the greatest obstacle in their relationship. Nadine was concerned that her older boyfriend could face legal issues because of his involvement with a minor, but they were reluctant to break up. At first, Nadine carefully hinted to her parents about the significant changes in her life, which raised some alarms for her mother and father. However, Andreas was determined and decided to take a bold step. He personally approached Nadine's family to seek permission for their relationship. From the beginning, he emphasized that this was not a fleeting affair. He wanted to build a future with her but did not want to rush her, allowing her to finish school and pursue her education. Andreas was familiar with her brother, Kevin. Soon after meeting, they became close friends. During home visits, Andreas's initiative was highly appreciated by Nadine's parents, especially after she described him as well-mannered, polite, and loving. Overall, the family liked Andreas, so they permitted Nadine to continue their relationship. Nadine had just entered the challenging teenage years. Her parents believed that a relationship with an older boyfriend could positively influence her, as he could take care of her and protect her from unpleasant situations. Andreas acted as though Nadine meant a lot to him, growing closer to her family. Initially, they spent all their free time together, and after 3 years, Andreas moved in with them. Nadine and Andreas posted statuses on social media indicating their engagement. While Andreas had intentions of getting married, he respected Nadine's desires to finish school and make her own life decisions before rushing into marriage. They continued dating for several years, to the point where Nadine's family began to treat Andreas like their own son. Finally, Nadine turned 18, officially becoming an adult, while Andreas was already 24. They decided it was time to move out and live independently. Nadine's grandmother significantly assisted them by offering her apartment for Nadine and Andreas to settle in. By this time, Nadine had completed her schooling. She intended to continue her studies at college. She did not plan on marriage or children, which disappointed Andreas slightly, as she wanted to establish herself first. Nadine enrolled in driving school and attended classes with her friends, who often picked her up. She aspired to become a professional dancer and build a career in this field. To their relatives, Nadine and Andreas represented the epitome of romance. Although the age difference made their relationship seem unconventional, it was evident that their bond was built on love and mutual understanding. It seemed as though their lives were just beginning, with no threats on the horizon. Andreas had faced Nadine's transitional phase early in their relationship when she was just 14, and they had managed to cope with that difficult period, maintaining, even strengthening their bond. However, after she reached adulthood, some other challenges began to emerge in their relationship. Andreas was seriously determined to pursue further development, family life, and children, but he could not achieve the same aspirations from his beloved. A 24-year-old man, he worked as a bricklayer and spent the lion's share of his time, energy on his job. Upon returning home in the evening, he just wanted to relax with his girlfriend in their apartment, but this did not meet the new needs of an 18-year-old. While she had already become an adult, she still wanted to relax, spend time with friends, and go to parties. Previously, they had constantly gone out together, but now Andreas wanted to spend time at home in front of the TV, which was too boring for Nadine. Initially, she managed to persuade him to go for walks or spend time outside their home, but over time, this became nearly impossible. Andreas began to refuse such outings, citing fatigue and stating that he had to work in the morning. He complained that he wanted to relax and recharge but felt unsupported by her. During this period, the age difference between them became particularly apparent. Nadine was at the peak of her activity and craved entertainment, while she realized that Andreas had already moved past that phase of life, who now had other interests. However, she was not willing to adjust to him or give in. She wanted to live the life of a young woman, socialize, and have fun with her friends. All of this led to conflicts beginning to arise between them. Nadine even told Andreas that if this continued, she would have to break up with him. Despite her repeatedly expressing this not only to him but also to her friends and relatives, he did not take her words seriously. He saw no reason for a breakup, insisting that he still loved her, hoped she would calm down over time and everything would return to normal. He continued planning a lavish wedding, believing it was the right time since their relationship had lasted for 5 years. He wanted to change his social media status from engaged to married, but her insistence on remaining single, along with her constant reproaches and talk of breaking up, loomed over their relationship. Andreas increasingly became intrusive and rude. Nadine felt that he simply wanted to control her completely and grew angry that he could not succeed. She even began to tell her friends that they had always had problems that she had kept silent about. In the summer of 2018, Nadine made the firm decision to break up, but she did not want any conflict. She hoped they could maintain a friendly relationship. At that time, she was 19 years old, and Andreas was already 25. According to Nadine, her boyfriend was never cruel or aggressive and did not limit her communication with others. The major issue was his passivity and jealousy. He could not stand it when she was in the company of other guys. She even lost all her male friends after meeting Andreas at the age of 14. Nadine told her friend that they had decided to separate and live apart. She was sure that her boyfriend took it calmly. She believed their relationship was officially over after 5 years together. Nadine and Andreas stopped dating. He moved out of her grandmother's apartment and returned to his parents' house. The idea of maintaining friendly relations seemed to work as they both had mutual friends and kept in touch with their families. Andreas continued to be friends with Nadine's older brother, Kevin, as if nothing had happened. They were peers and had a lot in common. However, this was the calm before the storm. During this period, doubts began to surface during their communication. Nadine increasingly suspected that Andreas was not taking the breakup calmly. Kevin thought Andreas had accepted this as another whim of his girlfriend and was simply waiting for a signal from Nadine regarding the restoration of their relationship. The friends had discussed this many times. Andreas could not accept that it was truly over. Thoughts and conversations about his ex consumed almost all of his time. Andreas's behavior approached obsession. He seized every opportunity to communicate with Nadine, asking for a second chance, trying to win her back, even continuing to talk about marriage and children. Within the first month of the breakup, it became clear that Andreas did not understand the situation and was simply in denial. He did not realize that they were no longer a couple. Each time Nadine firmly said no, insisting that everything was over between them, she labeled their relationship as her youthful mistake, even confiding this to her other friends. All of this hurt Andreas, but he continued to endure. He still hoped for a reconciliation. Some of his friends sympathized with him, but by the end of the second month after the breakup, they too began to notice that his behavior resembled stalking. He showed up everywhere Nadine went, always initiating conversation. Andreas's persistence caused Nadine to start avoiding him. She tried to gently indicate that their relationship was over, but he only became more determined. When she tried to stop their meetings, he made efforts to interact with her. Nadine's friends and family knew that she was consistently rejecting his advances, but he was spreading different stories to his own circle. Even 2 months after the breakup, he still believed that she wanted to be with him and thought she was only trying to make him pursue her. Kevin tried to tell Andreas to move on and date other girls, but he remained stubborn. As of October 5, 2018, the situation remained unchanged. Nadine and Andreas had officially been separated for 3 months. Nadine's entire family was aware of the breakup. Even his parents tried to convince him to reconsider. That evening, Andreas spent time with Kevin. They visited several bars but didn't stay long in any of them. Eventually, they ended up at one bar, where Kevin unexpectedly saw Nadine. He found it surprising to run into her, especially since, despite the town being small, there were enough bars catering to tourists that it was unlikely they would see each other regularly. Andreas appeared to either be following Nadine, receiving updates on her location, or simply searching for her as he moved between various places throughout the evening. Kevin knew that for the past 3 months, Andreas had been claiming that he and Nadine loved each other and intended to get married once he won her back. While similar situations had occurred before, this time things were different. Nadine was not just with her friend, she was also accompanied by another man. When Andreas noticed this, he instantly became angry, approached Nadine, taking her hand and starting an argument. He attempted to pull her out of the bar, but she resisted. Her 24-year-old friend, Florian Jani, intervened, positioning himself between Andreas and Nadine. He insisted that he was merely a friend and not romantically involved with her, claiming they had only just met. Nonetheless, Andreas was not calmed by this explanation. He was furious that Nadine was spending time with another man and struggled to contain his anger, nearly provoking a fight in the bar. Nadine, Florian, and her brother worked hard to soothe him, prevented Andreas from asserting control over Nadine. After significant effort, they managed to calm him down, though he was still in tears. Feeling overwhelmed, Andreas chose to leave the bar, not wanting to remain in that environment. Kevin stayed behind with Nadine and Florian, worried about their safety. Andreas' outburst was alarming, and now Nadine felt genuinely concerned for her well-being. She didn't want to remain in the bar either, but feared that her ex might be waiting outside. After waiting to ensure Andreas had left, the entire group decided to walk Nadine home. Florian drove her back, even offered to stay the night to help her feel safe. Overwhelmed by fear, Nadine accepted his offer. This choice would prove to have significant consequences. Around 4 a.m., Andreas could no longer contain his jealousy and chose to contact his ex again. When he reached her house, he noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, which he recognized as Florian's. It became clear that Andreas hadn't gone home after leaving the bar. Instead, he had remained in the parking lot, secretly watching the group. He observed that Florian was with Nadine, while no one else had left the house. This only fueled his anger. Andreas suspected that Nadine was lying and dating someone new. He felt they were enjoying themselves together without a care. He resolved to confront both Nadine and Florian about the situation. Furious, Andreas jumped out of his car and started ringing the doorbell while banging on the front door. Instead of Nadine and her friend, her father, 59-year-old Rupert, answered. He came out to calm Andreas, who was shouting. Rupert insisted it was too late for arguments and asked Andreas to leave until morning, when they could discuss everything calmly. Rupert was aware of the situation involving Florian at the bar, reassured Andreas that Nadine and Florian were just friends. Understanding and approachable, Rupert shared a cigarette with Andreas, invited him to talk outside on the street. They had a conversation on various topics, as Rupert probably hoped this would soothe Andreas and persuade him to leave. Having known each other for several years, Andreas had become a valued member of Nadine's family. Nadine's parents treated him well, which is why Rupert chose not to call the police to remove his daughter's ex-boyfriend. After speaking with Rupert, Andreas seemed to feel less agitated. He got into his car and drove off, while Rupert returned inside to go to bed. However, just a short distance down the road, Andreas began to feel annoyed again. He came back 15 minutes later, knocking on the door and ringing the bell, which disturbed everyone in the house. Nadine and Kevin came out to confront him. Unlike Rupert, they were very upset, wanted to make it clear that Andreas needed to leave. A new argument broke out at the front door. No one was holding back their words. Nadine was determined to completely cut off ties with her bothersome ex and insisted that there should be no further relationship between them. She demanded that he vanish from her life for good. Kevin backed his sister, stating that their friendship was overdue to Andreas's stalking behavior. He was worried about Andreas's unhealthy actions and wanted nothing more to do with him. Meanwhile, Andreas felt betrayed, convinced that Nadine had been unfaithful and that Kevin was protecting her. He now felt abandoned by Kevin, who he believed should have supported him instead. Before leaving, Andreas tried to find out if Nadine had cheated. However, she firmly told him it was not his concern since they hadn't been dating for several months. At that moment, Andreas had a shocking realization. Nadine had actually broken up with him 3 months ago, and all his attempts to win her back were in vain. No one expected him to pursue her anymore. Feeling angry, Andreas decided to go home, choosing to avoid confronting his feelings of hurt. At 5:30 a.m. on October 6, 2018, Andreas returned to his ex's house. He began knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, but he did not shout. This time, Rupert responded. He was already very irritated because Andreas had kept the whole family awake the previous night. When Rupert opened the door, he intended to angrily chase Andreas away and threaten to call the police, but he was cut off before he could finish. Andreas pulled out a gun, shot him in the head twice, killing him instantly. He then stepped over Rupert's body and entered the house. Nadine's mother, 51-year-old Andrea, rushed outside when she heard the noise. Tragically, she became the next victim. Andreas then attacked Kevin. He went upstairs and attempted to enter Nadine's room, but Nadine and Florian had locked the door. Andreas determined that the quickest way to reach her was through the balcony. He went outside, climbed the bars on the building's facade, broke the window, opened fire on both Nadine and her friend Florian. This horrific event unfolded within just a few minutes, resulting in the deaths of 5 people. After committing the crime, Andreas drove to the Kitzbühel police station. He arrived around 6 a.m. and placed a gun in front of a police officer at the entrance. He confessed to having just shot 5 people. Additionally, he handed over a knife and a baseball bat, which he had used to break into the Hinterholzer home. He used the bat to shatter a window and gain access to Nadine's room. While the knife was never used, it appears he brought it along for safety. The police discovered 5 bodies at the scene, and the details of their deaths confirmed Andreas's account. Each victim had been attacked at close range with multiple bullets. Florian suffered gunshot wounds to his hands as he tried to defend himself. There was nothing missing from the house. The toxicology report indicated that Andreas was sober, with no alcohol or banned substance in his system. He had no prior legal issues. The entire community of Kitzbühel was in shock over the incident. In this close-knit town, crimes, especially such violent ones, were extremely rare. All the neighbors were familiar with the Nadine family, known for their kindness and helpfulness. They had good relationships with everyone in the area. Both the victim's family and the suspect's family were respected in the community. The community especially mourned the loss of Florian Jani, a talented young hockey player and goalkeeper who was seen as a promising individual. His compassion for Nadine ultimately led to his tragic death. Friends who knew Nadine well later stated that she had no romantic involvement with Florian. They were simply friends who enjoyed good conversations. However, some speculated that Florian stayed the night to protect her and suggested that they might have already begun dating. Following the tragedy, a small memorial with photographs of the victims was set up in the local church. Over the course of the month it remained there. More than 1,000 heartfelt notes were left by mourners and caring individuals in memory of the victims. Andreas had been in custody in a special cell designed for inmates needing extra supervision. The police considered him at high risk for end one's own life, so they monitored him closely. He spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and was allowed only 1 hour outside to walk in the yard. When the family of Andreas learned what had happened, they addressed the town's residents, expressed their condolences. They also informed the police that a gun belonging to Andreas's brother was missing. The brother had a permit for the firearm, which he kept at home for self-defense. Unfortunately, Andreas knew how to access it and where the key to the safe was. The gun's serial numbers matched, and Andreas confirmed that he had stolen the gun from the house. At a press conference, Andreas's parents expressed their belief that he should face appropriate consequences for his actions. They mentioned that their son's mental health had declined while he was in prison. Despite widespread public anger, the family attempted to explain Andreas's behavior. His father stated that Andreas had been struggling with depression, particularly following his breakup with Nadine. His mother added that while her son might have had mental health challenges, it is unclear why he and his family never pursued mental health treatment. Andreas faces charges for murdering 5 people with a firearm and for breaking and entering. Andreas's lawyer intends to base their defense on his client's questionable mental state. Andreas claims that after hearing hurtful remarks from Nadine and her brother, who attempted to force him out of the house, he lost touch with reality and was unable to control his actions. He states that the only thought in his mind was his desire to kill the cheater. He described this experience as a state of emotional turmoil. The lawyer hoped this would reduce his client's culpability. However, the prosecution argued that Andreas was merely pretending and insisted that he was aware of his actions, he fit to stand trial. The lawyer disagreed with this assessment. In the end, the court ruled that there were no grounds for reducing Andreas's criminal responsibility. Andreas believed he deserved a fair punishment and did not want to evade responsibility for his crime. From the outset, he intended to confess. He willingly went to the police station and had no plans to take back his confession made the morning after the massacre. His lawyers stressed Andreas's mental state during the case. Assessments revealed that he suffered from a disorder that left him with 2 choices: either walk away and forget or return to kill. There was no middle ground. Once he understood that he could not regain his relationship with Nadine, he became obsessed with the notion that Nadine should not belong to anyone. As soon as the murder trial started, Andreas confessed to the crime. He believed that confessing would make the legal process easier and reduce trauma for the victims' families, as well as for himself. He shared details about his relationship with Nadine, discussing his jealousy and the reasons behind his actions. He described Nadine as an attractive girl who attracted many admirers, which fueled his jealousy. Andreas held traditional views about women and felt that a good woman should behave differently. He couldn't accept Nadine's decision to break up, insisting that she was his property and that she shouldn't date or spend time with other men, even as just friends. On the night of the incident, he was also affected by Kevin's betrayal. Nadine's parents were annoyed with Andreas, and he was afraid of losing her entire family, with whom he felt closer than to his own. He claimed that after the breakup, his family did not provide the support he desperately needed, leading him to lose 10 kilograms. Ultimately, in a moment of rage, Andreas lost control and killed them all. Andreas showed remorse and offered condolences to the families of his victims, but some believed he was merely trying to get a lighter sentence. Prosecution witnesses testified that Nadine continuously told Andreas that their relationship was over. Despite this, he kept asking for another chance, hoping to get back together, and he stalked her without truly grasping the situation. During the hearing, Andreas came across as insecure. He spoke softly, often mumbling to himself, and cried during emotional moments. At times, he seemed to misunderstand the gravity of what happened, viewing it as an accident. The prosecution contended that there was clear evidence of a brutal, premeditated murder involving 5 victims. They argued that Andreas had ample time to think through his actions as he drove to and from his ex-girlfriend's house. When he returned home, he took 3 items: a gun, a knife, and a baseball bat, indicating that he had meticulously planned his actions. The choice to take a knife suggested he intended to ensure there would be no survivors among Nadine's family and her friend Florian. During the hearing, the prosecution pointed out that Andreas had changed his marital status on social media from engaged to widower. Andreas claimed that this change occurred shortly after Nadine's murder, but some friends and acquaintances suggested that Andreas may have done so intentionally beforehand. Just a few months after their breakup, he started reacting more aggressively to Nadine's rejections. He often expressed a desire for her to be dead and sent messages accusing her of dating someone new, voicing a wish to kill that person. At the time, these statements were not taken seriously. The lawyer argued that these were simply emotional responses to rejection, which Andreas struggled to accept. However, this did not necessarily mean he intended to kill her. Nadine's friends mentioned that she had been feeling fearful of her ex lately and had been trying to avoid him as much as she could. She discovered that Andreas had been engaging in violent acts, such as beheading chickens with a machete and torturing cats. His actions appeared to be quite dangerous. During the trial, the defendant struggled to answer many questions, especially regarding why, in addition to Nadine, her friend Florian, brother Kevin, and her parents were killed. The lawyer argued that this showed Andreas lacked control over his actions and didn't fully grasp what was happening. However, the Austrian justice system made a definitive ruling: the murder of 5 people could not be seen as a mitigating factor. The idea that Andreas was insane was dismissed. By the end of the trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean he will be incarcerated for life. In Austria, individuals with life sentences are often released after an average of 21 years. Furthermore, the lawyer vowed to continue advocating for his client's release and planned to file appeals. Emily Beatriz Azevedo Senna was born in Várzea Grande, a city in the Brazil state of Mato Grosso. She lived with her mother and her stepfather, who became a father figure to her when she was 6. He worked as a radiology technician at Santa Helena Hospital in the nearby city of Cuiabá. The family lived a modest yet close-knit life. Emily was known for her kind nature, calm demeanor. Classmates and neighbors often described her as a gentle person who avoided conflict. At 16, Emily found out she was pregnant, a surprising discovery that she ultimately accepted. The father was a young partner of similar age. Instead of pulling away, he supported her throughout the situation. They started living together and he actively participated in getting ready for the baby's arrival. He went with Emily to doctor visits, assisted with planning, took part in conversations about names and baby items. Despite their youth, her partner demonstrated a strong sense of responsibility, dedication. Although their relationship encountered challenges because of their age, it was characterized as stable, supportive. For Emily, becoming pregnant was a major milestone in her life. She eagerly talked about her future daughter and shared her excitement with family, friends. Her mother and stepfather were very supportive, helping her choose furniture, buy clothes, prepare the nursery. Their home was filled with joy and anticipation. They celebrated the gender reveal twice, once with her partner's relatives and again with Emily's family. Friends remembered how glowing she looked when discussing her journey to motherhood. In another part of Mato Grosso, Natalie Helen Martins Pereira, a 25-year-old married to Christian Albino Cebalho de Arruda, 28, was raising their 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. Natalie worked in public safety, officially employed by the fire department while also taking nursing classes. To others, she seemed organized, responsible. However, beneath this surface, her life was more complicated. Several years ago, Natalie had a medical procedure that tied her fallopian tubes, which prevented her from becoming pregnant naturally. Despite this, she began claiming that she was expecting another child. To support her claims, Natalie created fake medical documents, including ultrasound images, and told others that she was having a baby girl. Christian believed her and shared the news on social media, posted the ultrasound images, even organized a gender reveal party. To make her story seem more convincing, Natalie often posted pictures of herself with what looked like a growing belly or loose clothing and explained her physical appearance as a sign of her impending delivery. In reality, this was all part of a carefully orchestrated and emotionally manipulative lie, a fake pregnancy that relied on fabricated evidence. Natalie not only staged a fake situation but also created an online identity. She joined various online groups for expecting mothers, where she pretended to be a helpful member who often offered items like baby clothes, diapers, and accessories to other moms-to-be. However, there was a catch. The items could only be picked up in person at her house, and the person collecting them had to come alone. This was a deliberate strategy where her online persona was used to make contacts and choose potential targets. No one in Natalie's close circle, neither Christian nor her family, realized that her cheerful demeanor was a meticulously crafted facade. She was intent on making her story a reality, regardless of the consequences. A few weeks before her disappearance, Emily started participating more often in online groups for expecting mothers. She shared her pregnancy thoughts, sought advice, and welcomed support. In one of these forums, she was approached by a user. Her messages were friendly. She offered to donate items for Emily's future daughter, such as clothes, baby blankets, and diapers. This seemed generous, and Emily was genuinely interested. Their conversation soon turned more personal. The user came across as warm and caring, emphasizing her desire to help. When Emily suggested bringing someone with her, like her partner or sister, Natalie became uneasy. She mentioned that her street had many nosy neighbors, and she wanted to avoid attracting any attention. Although her responses were unclear, they didn't raise any major red flags. Emily talked it over with her family and initially decided against going by herself. However, she changed her mind after Natalie offered to send a driver to pick her up, saying the car would be from a ride-sharing service like Uber. On March 12, 2024, around noon, a car came to pick up Emily. However, the driver, as later discovered by investigators, was not affiliated with any ride-sharing service. It was believed that he was either a relative or a friend of Natalie. The car was an ordinary civilian vehicle. Unaware of any potential danger, Emily got in after telling her mother that she would be back soon. She thought the outing would be just a quick trip to collect some donated items before returning home. After more than an hour without any updates from Emily, her mother, Anna Paula Meridian, started to feel anxious. Soon, messages began to come from Emily's phone. However, instead of soothing her worries, the texts only increased her anxiety. Emily claimed she was fine, enjoying a pastry, and would be back soon. Yet, something felt wrong. The language used was strange, overly formal, and didn't match Emily's usual way of writing. Anna quickly realized that someone else must have sent the messages. She attempted to call Emily, but there was no response, and her voice messages went unheard. As her concern grew, the family reached out to friends and acquaintances in hopes of finding Emily. Emily's stepfather was working at the hospital that day. He sensed something was wrong. He knew Emily had intended to pick up some items, and her failure to answer calls made him even more anxious. That evening, the family quickly decided to file a missing person report. At that time, no one knew where Emily was, who the driver was, or where she was headed. The only clue the family had was an online conversation with the woman, who mentioned living in the Jardim Florianopolis neighborhood in Cuiabá. This clue marked the beginning of a search by family members and friends. Worried and desperate, they knocked on doors in the neighborhood, checked the streets, and attempted to call the number mentioned in the messages, but no one answered. Communication had completely stopped. Emily's phone was still on, but she wasn't answering. Then, Natalie suddenly changed her online behavior. She stopped replying to chat group messages and withdrew her support for others. Later, it was revealed that shortly after Emily left home, Natalie deleted all her messages and her account. This disappearance from the online world only confirmed the family's deepest fears. This was not a chance occurrence. By the evening of March 12th, the search for Emily was in full swing. Her family had reached out to the local police, shared her photos on social media, and appealed to the public for assistance. The initial hours after her disappearance were filled with urgency and anxiety, but no one anticipated how drastically the situation would develop. The following morning, March 13, 2024, a woman arrived at the emergency room of Santa Helena Hospital in Cuiabá with a newborn. She was in a wheelchair and told the hospital staff that she had given birth at home the day before. She described the labor as quick and straightforward, so she hadn't felt the need for medical help at that time. Now, she said, she was just there for a post-delivery checkup. The woman introduced herself as Natalie. That morning, the hospital staff member on duty was Emily's stepfather, a radiology technician. Although he did not know Natalie personally, he immediately sensed that something was wrong when he saw her. The previous evening, Emily had gone missing, and one of the primary theories suggested it was linked to a conversation she had with an online stranger who was offering baby items. Emily had previously mentioned to both her mother and her stepfather that she met someone online. She even shared a photo of her from the messaging app. Emily's stepfather immediately recognized the woman in the photo as the same person Emily had been talking to before she disappeared. Natalie was holding a newborn baby that the doctors believed had just been born. However, something seemed unusual. Her behavior and physical state did not align with what one would expect from someone who had recently given birth. There were no visible signs of pain, post-labor symptoms, bleeding, or trauma. Medical staff also found that she was not producing milk when she tried to breastfeed. Even the way she stood and moved raised concerns. Even though she arrived in a wheelchair, she moved around confidently and chose to sit in a chair rather than needing to. A preliminary medical evaluation raised concerns. There were no signs that she had recently given birth. Her cervix was not dilated, and her uterus was of normal size, showing no changes or discharges that usually occur after delivery. This became crucial evidence that proved her story was false. The medical staff quickly informed hospital administrators and contacted local authorities about the situation. Emily's stepfather told investigators that Emily had gone missing the day before after planning to meet a woman. When he recognized the woman in front of him matched Emily's description and photo, his concerns grew. When officers arrived at the hospital, Natalie claimed that the newborn girl was her daughter, whom she had given birth to at home. She could not provide any documentation to support her claim, saying the birth was unexpected and there was no time to go to a medical facility. She answered questions calmly and showed no signs of distress. Investigators started looking into the origin of the newborn. They ordered emergency blood tests and DNA analysis. Medical professionals confirmed that the baby had been born within the last 24 hours, which matched the timeline of Emily's disappearance. This led to a troubling question: could this child be Emily's daughter? Investigators examined Natalie's phone and found deleted conversations, including exchanges with Emily. These messages showed that Emily had agreed to meet Natalie to receive baby items. This evidence indicated a clear pattern of deception. Natalie had created a false identity, gained trust, and arranged a meeting under false pretenses. At this point, the idea that Natalie had simply gone to the hospital for a checkup was no longer believable. Law enforcement began to suspect that Natalie may have brought a baby that she did not give birth to, but rather one that was taken from someone else. Their suspicions were confirmed when they analyzed ultrasound images that Natalie had shared on social media. Investigators discovered that these images did not belong to her. They were taken from another woman's profile, a woman living in a different state, who had no known connection to Natalie. As these discrepancies emerged, the police shifted their focus to finding Emily. The infant Natalie had brought to the hospital was placed in temporary protective custody under the care of social services until her biological identity could be verified. Shortly after, Natalie was taken to the police station for formal questioning. At first, she remained silent. When directly asked about the child's origin, she gave vague answers, claiming that everything had been explained and that nothing wrong had occurred. Although she appeared calm and showed no signs of panic, her reluctance to provide a clear explanation led investigators to suspect that she was stalling. Only after investigators showed her the medical exam results, which disproved her claim of giving birth, along with the recovered text messages linking her to Emily, did Natalie change her story. She then shared her initial account of events. She claimed to have met Emily in online parenting groups and said that Emily was struggling in her relationship. Emily had thought about not keeping the baby. Natalie asserted that she offered to take care of the child and that Emily had agreed. However, law enforcement had doubts about this explanation. Emily's family strongly denied any claims that she intended to give up her daughter. They insisted that Emily had been excited about her baby's arrival and never showed any doubts about keeping her. The whole family actively prepared for the new baby by buying clothes, setting up a nursery, and celebrating together. Emily's mother and stepfather emphasized that she viewed her future daughter as the most important part of her life, and the thought of giving the baby away was entirely unthinkable for her. This information was part of the official case file, and Natalie's statements were now being examined for inconsistencies. When faced with increasing evidence, Natalie eventually changed her story. In a second interview with investigators, she confessed that she had tricked Emily into coming to a house by pretending to offer baby items. Emily arrived alone, as they had agreed in their online communication. Emily then began to feel pain and sat down, complaining of cramps. At that moment, Natalie approached her from behind and forcefully restrained her. After Emily lost consciousness, Natalie bound her wrists and ankles with materials she had available. She then tried to deliver the baby by making an incision in Emily's abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool. Emily received no medical assistance and ultimately died due to severe blood loss. Natalie did not express any regret in her statement. She claimed that she wanted to take care of the baby and did not mean to cause any harm. However, the way she acted, using restraints and preparing certain materials, suggested that her actions were thought out beforehand. As Natalie continued to speak, her versions of events became more inconsistent with the facts. Investigators ultimately determined that the incident was pre-planned. After questioning Natalie, law enforcement started investigating all places associated with her. One property in the Jardim Florianopolis area received special attention. This private residence, owned by Natalie's brother, was said to be where she met Emily. During the property inspection, police noticed an area behind the house where the ground looked recently disturbed. The soil was uneven. They quickly cordoned off the area and called in forensic specialists. As the specialists carefully removed the top layer of soil, they discovered that a body had been buried. Emily's body was found in a shallow grave, covered loosely with dirt and debris. The way the body was positioned indicated it had been disposed of hurriedly. Her wrists and ankles showed signs of restraints, including ropes and bits of plastic cable. Investigators later determined that the bindings were made from old internet wiring. The grave itself was poorly dug, without the use of tools, and was barely big enough to hold the body. Emily's body displayed clear signs of trauma on her body. Her face had visible injuries, including bruises, swelling, and scratches. Forensic experts noted damage to her cheekbones and nose. There were also marks on her neck that suggested she had been choked, as well as bruises on her wrists indicating she had been forcefully held down. The autopsy revealed that these injuries occurred while she was alive, implying the use of significant force. It was determined that her death resulted from severe blood loss due to a deep wound in her abdomen. The precise T-shaped incision in her lower abdomen indicated that it was not an accident. Forensic experts indicated that the shape and depth of the cut suggested the perpetrator had a basic understanding of internal anatomy and made an effort to avoid injuring the baby. This degree of knowledge is rare for someone without medical training, although it could be obtained by watching detailed instructional videos. This was further confirmed by analyzing Natalie's internet search history. A key finding was that the burial site had been prepped in advance. Initially, Natalie claimed she dug the grave after the incident, but she later changed her story, admitting it was prepared the day before the meeting. A forensic team carefully examined the scene. Using chemical tests, they discovered important traces of biological material both inside the house and throughout the property. Blood stains were present in multiple rooms. Although some parts of the floor had been cleaned, residues were still left in the tile grout and seams. These findings were meticulously recorded and included in the criminal case. Given the amount of evidence, authorities officially reclassified the case as a premeditated crime with aggravating factors. Immediately after her arrest, Natalie stated that she acted alone and that her husband, relatives, anyone else were unaware of her plans. At that time, the house was occupied by her brother and his wife. Natalie stated that her brother and his wife were not home when the crime happened, but investigators could not confirm this. Their exact whereabouts during that time remained uncertain. A significant question was whether they could genuinely be unaware of a freshly dug pit on the property or that someone had come in to help clean the house. However, it was later established that Natalie had been to the house several times leading up to the incident, under the pretense of helping with chores or spending the weekend. This made her visits seem normal and unremarkable to those living there. Forensic experts noted that it would be very challenging for a single person to dig a pit, commit an act of violence, perform a makeshift procedure, move a body, clean the crime scene, hide evidence, and leave the area without drawing attention, all within a short period. This is especially true given the logistical difficulties involved. The body was wrapped in fabric and required various materials, while the cleaning process included removing items, white blood, and washing clothing. Each of these tasks demanded time, strength, and coordination. Did Natalie truly act alone? At the time of the investigation, there were increasing suspicions, but no solid evidence was found linking anyone else to the case. No family member had been officially identified as an accomplice. Cayo Police Chief Fernando Alvarez Albuquerque said authorities are continuing to investigate whether Natalie's husband, brother, and the driver had anything to do with the death and burial. After the body was officially identified and all forensic procedures were completed, Emily's family received permission for a burial. Because of the condition of the remains, the service was conducted quickly. The ceremony was brief and did not include a traditional farewell. It was held privately, attended only by immediate family members, Emily's mother, stepfather, the young father of the baby, and a few other relatives. The family was devastated by the loss. They were deeply affected emotionally and unable to speak publicly about their grief. Emily's mother, as reported by those close to her, was in a fragile emotional state and had withdrawn from social interactions, avoiding even her neighbors. Emily's partner, who never expected to become a father under such tragic circumstances. According to the family, he has remained dedicated. He frequently visits the baby. Despite his young age, he has shown a desire to be actively involved in raising his daughter. The newborn, who was rescued after the incident, has been placed temporarily in the care of her grandmother, Emily's mother, a decision made by child welfare authorities and the district attorney's office. Emily's stepfather is also considered one of the responsible guardians. During the first few weeks, medical professionals monitored the baby's condition closely. Fortunately, she stayed in stable health. After receiving medical clearance, the baby was taken home to the same place where her mother had lived. The reason for Natalie's actions remained a key topic of conversation. Even though she was already a mother of 3, she pretended to be pregnant for almost 9 months, creating an illusion of expecting another child. She went to great lengths to forge medical records and create a believable story online, portraying herself as an expectant parent on social media. However, her goal was not just to have another baby, she specifically sought out expecting mothers who were likely to have daughters. Her method of selecting targets, arranging the setting, and researching how to remove and take baby indicated that her actions were carefully planned. Natalie is still in custody, waiting for her trial. The charges against her are still active, and investigators believe the evidence supporting these charges is strong. Emily's case has gained significant attention and raised serious concerns, influencing how online interactions are perceived, particularly among vulnerable groups. It was a cold, quiet night, but something frightening was about to unfold in the woods near Altrincham. A car stopped on the deserted road. The driver, a 19-year-old, got out and looked around nervously. In the passenger seat was Alex Rada, only 15 years old and unaware that this night would change his life forever. What began as a secret between them had grown into something dangerous. Trust had been broken, emotions were running high, soon everything would take a deadly turn. But what really happened that night? The Rhoda family enjoyed a quiet and happy life in a village in Cheshire, northeastern England. Their home was warm and welcoming, shared by Lisa, her husband Adam, and their first child, Adam Jr. For many years, they had hoped to grow their family. Nearly a decade later, their dream was realized in what Lisa called a miraculous event. On March 5, 2004, they welcomed their second son, Alex Rada. As Alex grew up, Lisa noticed he had interests that were different from many other children. He enjoyed playing with her makeup and handbags. When he turned 13, Alex bravely told his parents a personal truth: he was gay. Lisa and Adam had suspected this for a while and welcomed his disclosure with open arms, offering their full support. However, Adam was worried, not about Alex's identity, but about how society might react to him. Unfortunately, his concerns were valid. At school, Alex faced teasing from some classmates, especially from boys who had difficulty accepting those who didn't fit their expectations. Despite this, Alex remained confident. Unlike many of his peers, he never felt the need to hide who he was. At Holmes Chapel Comprehensive School, Alex formed a close group of friends, predominantly girls. They cared for him deeply and supported him completely. These friendships acted as a shield when he faced unkindness, helping him thrive without letting negativity affect him. Full of joy and confidence, Alex was known for his infectious laughter. A bright student, he was also very active on social media, where he enjoyed sharing snippets of his life, his singing, dancing, and laughter. One of his accounts had gained over 4,000 followers. He had a uniquely close relationship with his father, one that resembled friendship. By the time Alex turned 15, he had become quite popular, with his phone frequently buzzing with messages from friends and admirers. However, one message he received one evening particularly caught his attention. It was from Matthew Mason, an older boy known for his mysterious online presence. Something about it made Alex pause. Matthew was a 19-year-old from the neighboring town of Ollerton. He grew up in a wealthy and religious family, living on a large estate valued in the millions. Every Sunday, they attended church together. At school, Matthew was known for being composed. Like Alex, he graduated from Holmes Chapel Secondary and went on to study agricultural engineering. He was a member of the Young Farmers Organization and worked part-time as an apprentice mechanic. In his spare time, he enjoyed fishing with his father, with whom he had a strong bond. At that time, Matthew was also dating a girl named Caitlin Lancashire. In October 2019, Alex shared with Georgia, one of his closest friends, that he had been receiving messages from Matthew. Georgia was surprised because she had known Matthew from school and had never seen him show any interest in men or suggest that he was bisexual. The situation felt strange. Alex and Matthew were from completely different backgrounds. They had never associated with each other socially. Without social media, they might never have met. Georgia warned Alex to be cautious. However, as the messages kept coming, Alex began to feel excited. He added Matthew as a friend on a social media platform, and their conversations quickly became more frequent. For Alex, this felt like the start of something special, his first experience with love. He had never been in a relationship before, and it was exhilarating, as if he was entering a whole new world. Initially, Alex and Matthew's exchanges were light, casual, but over time, they grew flirtatious and more intimate. Matthew complimented Alex's looks. Soon they began sharing photos. One night, after drinking too much at a bar, Matthew made a poor choice. He sent Alex an explicit photo of himself. Alex's friends noted that he often didn't understand the seriousness of situations, seeing them as jokes. Because of this, he viewed Matthew's message as part of a playful flirtation. Things became more serious when Matthew sent a video of a compromising nature. As their online relationship grew, Matthew proposed they meet in person and offered to pick Alex up, but Alex declined, saying his father wouldn't allow it. Despite this, they continued to exchange hundreds of messages. Wanting to know more about Matthew, Alex looked into his social media accounts, only to discover that Matthew was already in a relationship. This revelation filled Alex with frustration and doubt, making him question everything between them. Determined to find out the truth, Alex messaged Matthew's girlfriend, Caitlin, the girl he had seen in several of Matthew's posts. On November 3rd, Alex asked Caitlin if she was dating Matthew. When she confirmed it, Alex revealed that he had been secretly involved with Matthew for the past 2 to 3 weeks. Caitlin was stunned. Alex shared details of their explicit conversations and explained that he only learned about Matthew's relationship after investigating him online. According to media reports, jealousy was a significant factor in Alex's actions. An hour after speaking with Caitlin, Alex confronted Matthew, informing him that he had told Caitlin the truth. Alex's frustration was evident as he accused Matthew of being deceptive, both to Caitlin and to him. He insisted that Matthew needed to be honest because Caitlin deserved it after 2 years together. But Alex had already made the decision to reveal the truth himself. Matthew, who came from a strict religious background, was extremely afraid of his secrets getting out by Alex. In a panic, he denied any accusations to Caitlin and called Alex a liar. This marked a troubling change in the relationship between Alex and Matthew. Feeling trapped, Alex threatened to leak an explicit photo he had of Matthew. Reports indicate that later that same day, Matthew made Alex a beneficiary on his bank account and transferred over £50 to him. By this point, Caitlin had already ended her relationship with Matthew. Despite their issues, on November 9th, Alex and Matthew met in person for the first time and became physically involved. Their secret relationship continued over the next 2 weeks. While everything seemed fine to outsiders, the payments to Alex didn't cease. Matthew was not ready for the truth to surface, but everything came to a head on December 12, 2019. After weeks of threats and pressure, Matthew lost control. On that cold, rainy night, he picked Alex up from his home and drove him to a remote forested area near Altrincham, claiming they were going to have another intimate encounter. However, once they arrived, Matthew violently attacked Alex with a wrench he had brought along. After committing this brutal act, Matthew drove to a friend's farm, hoping to destroy any evidence linking him to the crime. To create an alibi, he then casually went to 2 different bars, meeting friends for drinks as if nothing had happened. At one bar, he took a selfie and shared it on social media, further emphasizing his facade of a typical night out. Later, he even took a picture of himself smiling in bed, with his bare torso showing, which he sent to Caitlin to strengthen his alibi. In the middle of the night, he discovered Alex's phone on the passenger seat of his car. Aware of the damaging information it contained, he quickly disposed of it. As the night went on, Matthew returned to the forest. He attempted to move Alex's lifeless body to the roadside and tried to lift him into his Renault Clio. However, after several unsuccessful attempts, he abandoned the body there and walked away. Alex's parents were becoming more and more worried about his disappearance. After they were unable to contact him, they reported him as missing. Soon, the police, friends, and family were all frantically searching for him. A police officer from Cheshire texted Matthew, asking him to reach out regarding Alex's disappearance. By morning, the stark reality emerged. Garbage collectors stumbled upon Alex's severely disfigured body, found half-naked and bearing multiple wounds. When law enforcement arrived at the forest crime scene, they discovered that Alex had endured at least 15 blows to the head in what officials labeled a brutal and ruthless attack. A witness had unknowingly implicated him the night before. A photo of a vehicle parked by the roadside was taken, and when the police traced it, they linked it to Matthew. On November 13th, just before noon, officers arrested him on a highway nearby. Despite his efforts to remove the evidence, dried blood was still evident on his car. A search of his car's trunk revealed a garbage bag filled with incriminating items, a blood-stained green sweater, the wrench used in Alex's attack, and a large padded jacket that belonged to Alex. With compelling evidence against him, Matthew was taken into custody and formally charged with the crime. Investigators traced the unfortunate path of Alex and Matthew's relationship, which began with curiosity but ended in horrific violence. Their online interactions often focused on money, culminating in a crucial conversation moments before Alex's violent death. Records indicate that after an initial payment, Matthew had sent Alex a total of £1,270, supposedly for their meetings and to guarantee his silence. The final payment of £100 was sent just 5 days before the murder. As the investigation continued, unsettling new information came to light. Matthew's internet search history revealed his disturbing mindset. He had looked up methods to kill someone. His searches included queries like what happens if you push someone down the stairs, as well as information on poisons and unsolved missing person cases in Cheshire. One of Alex's friends mentioned that when Matthew first contacted Alex to set up their last meeting, Alex was excited. However, after a second phone call, he started to feel uneasy. Alex even texted his friend, questioning whether it was odd that the meeting was in a secret, special location. By that time, Alex sensed that something was wrong. Despite his concerns, he ultimately decided to go, likely because he needed the money. Moments after entering Matthew's car, Alex shared one final image on his social media story. It was a simple photo of the car's interior with a small heart emoji at the bottom. This was the last message Alex ever posted. His closest friends, who often discussed his new relationship with him, grew increasingly concerned over time, particularly because he kept asking for more money. At one point, Matthew told Alex that he was having financial difficulties and could no longer send Alex money. However, shortly after that, he transferred nearly £700 to Alex. Alex's friends, whose names are kept confidential for legal reasons, later informed the police that they were aware of the wrongdoing and had expressed their concerns to Matthew. Despite their advice, Alex decided to continue with his actions. The trial started on January 25, 2021, at Chester Crown Court. The jury learned that the two individuals had only known each other for a few months but had been involved in a secret and illegal relationship during that period. Under English law, a relationship between a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old is considered unlawful because the age of consent is 16. This means that any intimate activity involving someone under 16 is strictly prohibited, regardless of their willingness. During his testimony in court, Matthew acknowledged hitting Alex with a wrench but sought to explain his actions by saying he lost control due to being blackmailed by Alex. He described their initial interactions, which began in October 2019 with casual conversations. Over time, however, Alex reportedly started sending late-night messages that included personal and suggestive inquiries, such as whether Matthew was clothed. He also claimed that Alex had attempted to attack him prior to his death. Matthew mentioned that he was struggling financially and had lost friends, family as a result of the situation. Although he did not clearly specify what the payments were for, he insisted that he was under immense pressure. Furthermore, he expressed feelings of shame and discomfort after becoming intimate with Alex. At one point, Matthew recognized that his actions were wrong, not only because Alex was male but also due to his age. During the trial, prosecutors shared all the details of Alex's conversations with Caitlin, who was Matthew's girlfriend at the time. One of the detectives strongly disagreed with Matthew's assertion that the murder was spontaneous. The detective argued instead that Matthew had carefully planned the attack and had tricked Alex into going to a secluded place, thinking that no one would discover his intentions. During the victim impact statements, Alex's parents, Adam and Lisa, honored their son with heartfelt words, describing him as a beautiful and loving child. Through tears, Lisa shared that losing a child in such a horrific way felt like living in hell. She highlighted that Alex was raised in a loving environment, not a fearful one, and he was always proud of himself, never needing to hide or pretend. Lisa condemned Matthew's actions, noting that despite his early admission of guilt, Matthew put their family through additional trauma in a selfish effort to lessen his sentence. She expressed that he didn't consider the immense pain he caused both families. Lisa described Matthew as the most selfish and calculating person she had ever met, criticizing his attempts to blame Alex and tarnish his reputation. During the trial, Adam reflected on his son as a cheerful and respectful young man who always considered other people's feelings. He acknowledged that he could never fully recover from the loss and that their lives would be forever changed. After a month-long trial and over 9 hours of jury deliberation, the jury rejected Matthew's account of the events and found him guilty by a majority vote of 10-2. As he sat in the defendant's chair, crying, the judge announced his sentence. Because he used a weapon during the crime, the mandatory minimum sentence was set at 25 years. The judge characterized the murder as premeditated, indicating it was carefully planned and executed with no remorse. He noted that although Alex may have initiated contact, Matthew not only responded but also actively encouraged an intimate relationship. The judge emphasized that Matthew was significantly more experienced than Alex, who was still young and emotionally immature. Additionally, he stated that Matthew had intentionally created the situation. While this was not Matthew's first intimate experience, it was Alex's first. The judge concluded that Alex's naive demands were influenced by the intimate offenses committed by Matthew, so the responsibility for what happened did not lie with Alex. In deciding Matthew's sentence, the judge emphasized his total lack of empathy, his complete disregard for the victim and the victim's grieving family. As a result, in January 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 28 years before being eligible for parole. However, on June 2021, Matthew's legal team filed an appeal against this sentence. After considering both written and oral arguments, a panel of 3 appellate judges concluded that the original sentence was too long and reduced the minimum term from 28 years to 26 years. Matthew faced a deep internal conflict as he struggled to accept his own gender and feared rejection. This unresolved conflict caused him unimaginable pain and destruction. In his desperate attempt to avoid confronting his reality, he not only compromised his own future but also hurt someone who accepted him without shame or fear. Ashley Bocanegra was born in the Bronx, one of New York City's 5 boroughs. She was raised by her mother along with her older sister. There is no public information about her father, and it remains unclear whether he was involved in Ashley's life. The family lived modestly but maintained a stable lifestyle. Ashley was outgoing and energetic. She took pride in her appearance and had a strong interest in makeup. From a young age, she enjoyed experimenting with different styles, which made her stand out among her peers. After high school, she did not pursue a specific career path right away. Instead, she worked in retail while trying to figure out her future, but she did not have any firm plans. Around this time, she met a young man with whom she soon developed a serious relationship. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually, Ashley found out she was expecting. The pregnancy was unplanned, but they both decided to embrace this new chapter in their lives and moved in together. In 2014, Ashley gave birth to a son whose name has not been publicly disclosed out of respect for his privacy. The arrival of their son marked a significant shift. Ashley became fully focused on being a mother. Despite being young, her partner stepped up and participated in raising their child. Life in New York City was becoming increasingly challenging, with rising rent and piling daily expenses. By early 2015, they decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, a city with more affordable housing and a slower pace of life that was not too far from extended family. This move represented a fresh start for them. They secured an apartment in a residential complex that had security cameras and on-site staff. Visually, the neighborhood appeared safe, and they hoped it would be a place to rebuild their daily lives. Although their romantic relationship eventually came to an end, they continued to live under the same roof for the sake of their son. They agreed to keep their personal lives separate until their son was older. Ashley took on most of the household responsibilities and began looking for a stable job. Eventually, she landed a position at a home improvement store, working the night shift. This arrangement allowed her to be at home during the day. It was a tough schedule, but it helped her improve her financial situation. Ashley was working toward creating stability and gradually gaining independence from her former partner, all while maintaining peaceful family dynamics. As Ashley adjusted to the demanding rhythm of overnight work, she became familiar with the store's routine. Most of her shifts took place on weeknights, and she was consistently scheduled with the same group of co-workers. This consistency helped form close-knit working relationships. It was in this environment that she first took notice of Daniel Gonzalez. He also worked at the same home improvement store and was usually scheduled on the same nights. Their conversations began with routine work-related questions. Daniel was proactive. He did not shy away from hard tasks and often volunteered for demanding assignments. He came across as calm, polite, and friendly. Although he wasn't pushy, he was often nearby when Ashley needed an extra hand. Over time, they developed a steady rapport. What started as brief exchanges during breaks slowly evolved into real conversations, and Ashley felt at ease around him. There was no pressure or signs of him pushing boundaries. Daniel earned her trust. He avoided discussing personal matters and never made suggestive remarks, but it was clear he was interested. He asked about her day, showed concern for her well-being, and offered to help even when she had not asked for it. This set him apart from the rest of the crew. With each shift, their connection grew. Eventually, they exchanged numbers and began texting outside of work. Their messages quickly turned into a regular flow of jokes, short chats about everyday life, and occasionally planning to meet before work. Their bond transcended that of mere co-workers, yet there was nothing overtly romantic about it. Everything felt natural. No one was rushing into anything, and neither made any direct moves. At that time, Ashley was unaware of Daniel's personal life. Neither he nor their co-workers mentioned that he was living with a woman and their children. Daniel never discussed who shared his home. There were no indications that he was in a relationship. In normal conversations, he seemed calm and composed, displaying no signs of stress or complicated domestic issues. They eventually realized they were neighbors living in the same apartment complex. They discovered this by chance during a conversation about their neighborhood. This made it easy for them to see each other not only at work but also during the day. Sometimes, Daniel would help Ashley carry her groceries, or they would bump into each other in the parking lot, where he would walk her to her building. To Ashley, this felt like a comfortable friendship with a reliable coworker. His proximity and willingness to help were nice perks, making him seem thoughtful. She was unaware of his actual circumstances. At the time of these events, Daniel Gonzalez was a 27-year-old living in Atlanta, Georgia. He was in a long-term relationship with Antonetta Stevens, a woman of the same age, although they were not legally married. They had been together for over a decade, having known each other since childhood, as their families were longtime friends. Throughout their relationship, they became parents to 2 sons, aged 9 and 6. However, their home life was more complicated than it appeared. Daniel and Antonetta's relationship had become increasingly strained over the years, with arguments happening more often. While most disagreements arose from everyday issues, they frequently escalated into larger conflicts. People close to them described Antonetta as having a quick temper. She could quickly shift from calm to confrontational over minor annoyances. This tendency was noticeable not only to Daniel but also to others in their circle. Daniel seldom discussed his home life with his colleagues. Only a few close friends were aware of his personal struggles, which he kept private. However, the ongoing stress at home began to take a toll on him. His relationship with Antonetta shifted from one of love to a focus on logistics, with conversations revolving around parenting, bills, and household chores. Although they still appeared as a couple to outsiders, their emotional connection was diminishing. During this time, Daniel's younger sister, Janine Gonzalez, who was 17 and had recently dropped out of school, moved in with them. She lacked a clear direction, needed a new environment to get back on track. Janine quickly bonded with Antonetta due to their shared history, having known each other since childhood and considering each other more like sisters than in-laws. In contrast, Daniel did not have a strong relationship with Janine. The presence of a third adult in the household did not reduce the tension. In fact, it increased it. Janine frequently witnessed the arguments between Daniel and Antonetta. Eventually, she began to take sides, clearly supporting Antonetta. Those familiar with the family noted that Janine openly expressed her belief that Daniel was responsible for the ongoing conflicts. This alliance between Janine and Antonetta only widened the emotional gap in the household, leaving Daniel feeling isolated. By the time Daniel started spending more time with Ashley, he was already feeling disconnected. His partner was irritable, their sons required constant attention, and his sister emotionally sided with Antonetta. The home atmosphere felt strained and unwelcoming. Daniel began spending more time outside of his home, taking extra shifts at work and staying later as a way to avoid conflicts in his life. Although these choices would later impact his decisions, he didn't express any strong desire to change his situation at that time. After a few weeks of talking at work and texting outside of their shifts, Ashley and Daniel started to meet up more often outside of work. Their conversations shifted from casual workplace topics to more personal subjects. They discussed feelings of tiredness, daily routines, and the challenges of parenting. Ashley shared her experiences raising her son, her complicated relationship with her partner, and her hopes of moving out to live independently. Daniel listened closely. He didn't interrupt her, kept the conversation flowing, and engaged with their shared difficulties. He never mentioned that he lived with a partner and 2 sons, nor did he talk about his sister. As Ashley and Daniel's relationship grew stronger, they began spending more time together. Sometimes, they would meet briefly before her shifts, while other times, they would talk outside her building. Over time, Daniel started to stay a bit longer. He would visit in the evenings, help her prepare dinner, and hang out while her son watched TV. This development felt gradual and natural, not sudden. Ashley didn't ask many questions, and Daniel didn't give her any reasons to doubt him. At that point, neither her son nor their coworkers intervened. Ashley enjoyed her independence. Everything appeared harmless from an outside perspective. Back at Daniel's apartment, things were starting to change. Antonetta and Janine began to pay closer attention to his schedule. Daniel was spending more time away from home, which did not escape their notice. Janine, who was usually at home, started to see a pattern. Daniel would leave without telling anyone where he was going and would often return later than expected. Though she didn't know his exact whereabouts, she began to keep track of his comings and goings. Eventually, she shared her concerns with Antonetta, and their suspicions grew. While Antonetta didn't confront Daniel immediately, his behavior made her feel uncomfortable. One day, Janine noticed something that confirmed her suspicions. Daniel was often seen with the same woman in the apartment complex parking lot. Although she didn't know Ashley's name yet, her appearance stuck in Janine's mind. Janine observed their conversations and noticed there were no inappropriate gestures, touching, or flirting, nothing that clearly crossed any boundaries. However, this situation raised her concerns. She didn't jump to conclusions, but from that moment, she started paying more attention. While Ashley viewed these meetings as casual and innocent, the atmosphere in Daniel's apartment became increasingly tense. Antonetta moved beyond just asking questions. She began checking his phone and closely monitoring his behavior. Although she had no solid evidence, the signs were accumulating. As a result, the trust between them began to erode. Ashley remained oblivious to any underlying issues. Daniel frequently visited, offering assistance and chatting about everyday matters, which seemed to strengthen their relationship. However, underneath these casual conversations, subtle changes were occurring. In the summer of 2022, Daniel, Antonetta, their sons, and Janine traveled to Florida for Antonetta's mother's wedding. They planned to spend a week with extended family, blending celebrations with a short vacation. The road trip was long, and they stayed at a relative's house. Despite the happy occasion, tension between Daniel and Antonetta was evident from the start. They argued during the drive over minor issues related to planning, coordination, and exhaustion. Upon arrival, the situation did not improve. Conflicts arose almost every day, and Antonetta's relatives noticed the strain in their relationship. By midweek, disagreements escalated over trivial matters. The tone of their exchanges turned increasingly sharp and irritable. Daniel often ended conversations abruptly, emotionally withdrew, and spent more time absorbed in his phone or stepping outside for solitude. Antonetta observed these changes and tried to remain calm, but her patience was wearing thin. After the wedding ceremony, while most guests were relaxing, a pivotal moment took place. Daniel, feeling tired and having had a few drinks, was outside in the yard talking to Janine. During their conversation, he expressed that he was exhausted from his relationship with Antonetta and didn't see a future with her. He also revealed that there was someone else in his life, without disclosing the name, but indicated it was a co-worker. Janine listened attentively, keeping her response neutral, though she was clearly processing the information. This conversation became a turning point. Feeling more loyal to Antonetta than to her own brother, Janine decided to share what she had learned. She informed Antonetta that Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else. To her surprise, Antonetta remained calm. Rather than confronting him right away, she chose to be strategic. Her priority was to identify the other woman. They agreed to keep their suspicions quiet and to closely monitor Daniel's behavior. Janine fully supported this plan, and they made a pact: no actions would be taken until they returned to Atlanta. Antonetta kept a calm, cheerful demeanor around her family for the rest of the trip. Though everything appeared peaceful on the surface, she was quietly strategizing to find out who the woman was. After returning from Florida, the mood in Daniel's apartment shifted. Antonetta and Janine didn't mention the wedding conversation, but they began to execute a plan they had developed in secrecy. Their goal was to find out if Daniel was really involved with a coworker. Instead of asking him directly, they decided to observe his habits and behavior. Since neither Antonetta nor Janine had full-time jobs at that moment, they spent most of their days at home, which allowed them to watch Daniel closely. Janine took note of when he left the apartment, who he interacted with, and how he acted when he returned. They also started checking Daniel's phone whenever it was left unattended or unlocked to look for notifications or messages. A few days after returning, Janine reported seeing Daniel leaving work with a young woman. They were outside, smoking and chatting. Janine noted that while their interaction didn't seem overtly romantic, there was a comfortable rapport between them. She remembered the woman's appearance, and when she described her, Antonetta suspected it might be their neighbor, Ashley. Antonetta recalled seeing Ashley in the complex courtyard occasionally, usually with her son. That evening, they decided to watch for Ashley to see if she would appear again. Over the next few days, Antonetta and Janine took turns watching the apartment entrance and the area surrounding the store to confirm whether it was indeed Ashley with Daniel. Their surveillance eventually paid off. They saw Daniel and Ashley talking and then going their separate ways. With this confirmation, they moved forward and took action. Antonetta proposed using Daniel's phone while he slept to message Ashley and lure her into a meeting, setting up a direct confrontation. Janine agreed with the plan. They now had a clear objective. It was no longer just about revealing the truth, it had turned personal. They wanted revenge. The next morning, after finishing a night shift, Daniel came home and went to sleep as usual, briefly chatting with Antonetta before heading to the bedroom. Once he was asleep, she quietly entered the room, took his phone, and brought it to Janine. Together, they started scrolling through his messages. It didn't take long to find what they were looking for. In his chat with Ashley, they found personal messages filled with emotional significance, mentions of past meetings, and small details that confirmed the two were in constant contact. That was all the confirmation they needed to move on to the next step. Antonetta used Daniel's phone to send a text to Ashley. She explained that Daniel had an argument at home, was kicked out, and wanted to meet. Ashley responded quickly, asking for his location and how to find him. Their conversation seemed typical for two people who know each other well, so Ashley was unaware that she was not actually communicating with Daniel. Antonetta kept the tone light and casual to prevent any suspicion. After exchanging a few more messages, Antonetta proposed they meet in the courtyard of their apartment complex, a small grassy area between the buildings, and Ashley agreed. After arranging the meetup, Antonetta and Janine started getting ready. They brought Janine's phone to record what would happen. They were unarmed and planned to lure Ashley outside to confront her unexpectedly and escalate things physically. Their intention was not just to have a conversation but to make a statement. They carefully chose the location. It was close enough to nearby buildings for visibility but out of sight from the main entrances. While there were surveillance cameras in common areas, they didn't cover this specific spot, offering a sense of privacy within the complex. At that time, Daniel was asleep, completely unaware that his phone was being used. Early in the morning, Antonetta and Janine left the apartment, leaving Daniel and the boys behind. They positioned themselves behind some bushes near a pedestrian path. The area was shaded and slightly away from the building entrances, but still on public property. Visibility was limited, although someone walking by might notice them. They waited. When Ashley texted to say she was on her way, Antonetta made sure the phone was recording and instructed Janine to continue filming no matter what. Minutes later, Ashley walked down the path, completely unaware of the danger that awaited her. As she neared her destination, she scanned the area, hoping to see Daniel. Suddenly, Antonetta and Janine emerged from their hiding place. Antonetta approached Ashley and loudly claimed that Ashley stopped texting Daniel. Before Ashley could reply, Antonetta attacked her. Ashley did not fight back. Instead, she tried to defend herself by covering her face with her hands and begging Antonetta to stop. Despite her pleas, Antonetta continued to hit her. Eventually, Antonetta knocked Ashley to the ground and continued to assault her with her fists and feet. At one point, she grabbed Ashley's hair and slammed her head against the pavement. Janine chose not to intervene and instead stayed on the sidelines, recording the events. Occasionally, she provided commentary, encouraging Antonetta to be more aggressive. At one point, she moved closer to capture a shot of Ashley's face, who was crying and pleading for them to stop. Despite Ashley's distress, the aggression continued. Antonetta yelled accusations, made threats, and claimed she was acting for Daniel. At one moment, she looked directly into the camera and told Janine to keep filming. Some cars drove by, but no one intervened. One vehicle stopped for a moment but then quickly left the scene. The conflict escalated when Antonetta invited Janine to participate. Janine accepted, approached, and delivered a few kicks. Afterward, both of them took Ashley's phone and walked away, with the recording still running until they left the area. Following the attack, Ashley lay on the pavement. Although she was seriously injured, she was conscious. After some time on the ground, she gradually stood up. She was unsteady. Despite the pain, she started walking toward her building. Later, surveillance footage from the apartment complex showed Ashley entering. Her steps were shaky, and her movements were slow. She was holding her side and chest, and her face had visible scrapes. Her breathing seemed labored. As soon as she reached her floor, Ashley stepped out onto the balcony and leaned against the railing to catch her breath. At that moment, her partner was coming home from his morning run. Upon entering the apartment, he quickly noticed that Ashley looked unwell. She was pale, had swollen lips, and visible cuts on her face. Her breathing was heavy, and she moved slowly. Her clothes were dirty, had some blood on them. Concerned, he asked her what had happened. Ashley responded vaguely, saying she had been attacked by two unfamiliar women but did not provide any names or reasons for the attack. She might have been too frightened or still in shock to explain further. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, her partner helped her sit down and got her some water, but her condition worsened. She struggled to breathe, experienced sharp pain in her side and head. Any movement caused her intense discomfort. A few minutes later, he took her to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, doctors assessed Ashley's condition and quickly decided to transfer her to intensive care due to its critical nature. Medical staff observed multiple bruises, broken ribs, and potential internal injuries. Additionally, she suffered a head injury. Meanwhile, her partner stayed at the hospital, anxiously awaiting news. Ashley was put on life support and sedated, but her condition worsened. Several hours after the assault, local law enforcement arrived at the apartment complex in response to reports of a possible fight from witnesses. When the officers reached the apartment shared by Antonetta, Daniel, their sons, and Janine, Daniel was not at home. Antonetta answered the door and spoke to the officers in a calm and composed manner. She explained that an uninvited woman had arrived at their door, started an argument, and became physically aggressive. Antonetta stated that she did not know the woman and that it was the woman who initiated the confrontation. She characterized the incident as a mutual fight, mentioning that both had exchanged blows. Antonetta also noted that the woman had been previously harassing her partner at work and had come to their home to continue the harassment. She made it clear that she had not left the apartment before the incident to support her version of events. At this point, the officers had not received a formal complaint from the injured party, did not know the identity of the other person involved, and had no direct evidence of the assault. While Antonetta's account was consistent, it did not match the known facts. Doctors at the first hospital where Ashley was treated had alerted local authorities because of the seriousness of her condition. However, when police arrived at the apartment complex, the medical report was not connected to the attack. Information about Ashley's injuries and her identity came to light later. The police left the apartment without filing an official report. They only documented a verbal statement. They did not conduct a search or collect phones as evidence, which resulted in the loss of important materials. At this point, Antonetta and Janine were unaware that they would soon be named as official suspects. After the initial examination in the emergency room, doctors suspected Ashley had suffered serious internal injuries. Although she was conscious, she was having difficulty breathing and could barely respond to questions. A CT scan showed multiple severe injuries. Broken ribs punctured her lungs, there was internal bleeding around her liver and abdomen, and she had a significant brain injury with swelling. Since the hospital lacked the necessary resources for urgent neurosurgery and abdominal procedures, doctors decided to transfer her immediately to a specialized trauma center. Ashley was put on a ventilator and sedated into a medically induced coma. She was airlifted to a hospital in another part of the state, where a team of trauma surgeons and critical care doctors was ready to assist. Upon her arrival, Ashley was taken straight to the operating room. The surgeons worked to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize her vital signs, but the injuries were too severe. Her liver was partially torn, and there was significant bleeding in her abdominal cavity. During the surgery, it became evident that her injuries were not survivable. About an hour after her transfer, Ashley suffered cardiac arrest. Medical teams performed CPR for 30 minutes but could not revive her. She was pronounced dead early that morning, just a few hours after the incident. While this was happening, hospital staff submitted a report to the local police department stating that a patient showed signs of having been attacked. As Ashley was being moved, this information was relayed to the on-call officer. However, it had not yet been linked to an earlier visit by officers to the complex. Ashley's death changed the legal context of the case. The police department received the hospital's report, which indicated that the situation had turned fatal. Officers quickly connected this update to the previous complaint about a physical altercation and realized that both incidents occurred at the same address. The deceased's last name was verified through medical records and matched with entries associated with the apartment complex. The police leadership decided to send officers back to Antonetta's apartment. By this time, they no longer considered it a simple domestic dispute. The situation was being seen as a potential felony that could result in death. This initiated a formal criminal investigation. Authorities also requested Ashley's complete medical records to assess the severity and nature of her injuries. The initial medical report revealed that her injuries could not have occurred from a minor fight or mutual confrontation. The trauma to her head, chest, and internal organs indicated she had suffered a severe beating. There were multiple blows aimed at vital areas. Additionally, there were no signs of defensive wounds or any indication that she fought back, suggesting that the victim likely did not defend herself during the attack. Following the medical findings, the forensic report, and surveillance footage from the apartment complex, a criminal case was officially opened. After confirming Ashley's death, investigators returned to the complex, arrested Antonetta and Janine. They were taken to the precinct and interviewed separately starting immediately. Antonetta seemed calm but distant during her questioning. She avoided making eye contact, spoke in a low voice, and gave unclear answers. She provided short responses and repeated the same story she had told earlier, that Ashley had come to their home uninvited, started an argument, and threw the first punch. She did not mention any text messages, a pre-arranged meeting, or the use of Daniel's phone. Antonetta maintained that the incident was unplanned and that she acted solely in self-defense. When detectives highlighted discrepancies between her account and the medical evidence, she did not respond. After answering a few more questions, she requested a lawyer and ended the interview. Janine's interrogation took an unexpectedly relaxed turn. She entered the room confidently and spoke freely, showing no signs of nervousness. At times, she even laughed and made sarcastic remarks, behaving more like she was chatting with friends than talking to law enforcement. The detectives mirrored her casual tone and avoided any confrontational approach, which proved effective. Janine began to share details openly about the events, including some information that hadn't been revealed before. She openly explained how Daniel had admitted to seeing someone else, how she had passed that information to Antonetta, and how they devised a plan to message Ashley using Daniel's phone. She also detailed who initially suggested recording the encounter and how they concealed themselves until Ashley arrived. Janine's account of the confrontation was particularly striking. She openly admitted to being physically aggressive, stating that she joined in because she was invited to participate. She even described the incident as amusing. The detectives documented her statements but did not interrupt her. They maintained neutral expressions, allowing her to express herself freely. During the questioning, Janine confirmed that she had recorded the incident on her phone and still had the footage saved. She revealed almost everything Antonetta had tried to hide. Her statements were officially noted. Janine's emotional distance and complete lack of remorse strengthened the evidence that the attack was not only intentional but also planned in advance. After the interviews, investigators obtained search warrants and seized phones from everyone involved, including Janine's. Her phone contained a full video recording of the assault. The footage showed that Ashley did not fight back, and the attacks were carried out methodically with clear intent. The audio also captured mocking remarks, threats, and statements indicating that the attack was premeditated. Daniel's phone showed a message thread where Antonetta pretended to be him to set up the meeting. This was clear proof of the trick used to put Ashley in danger. As a result, Antonetta and Janine were charged with serious crimes, including felony assault and robbery. Their arrests were part of a larger criminal investigation. The charges were explained to them, highlighting the serious legal consequences they faced. Both were arrested without any resistance, but officers closely monitored the situation. Daniel later learned about the events that unfolded. When the arrests took place, he was at work. Officers came to his workplace to inform him of Ashley's death and the charges against Antonetta and Janine. He was heartbroken, having no knowledge of the revenge plan, the impersonation using his phone, or the attack itself. He stated that he could never have predicted that things would turn into such a tragedy. Daniel was asked to provide a formal statement. He confirmed that Ashley had never been a threat to anyone and that their relationship was not a secret. He also mentioned that he had never given his phone to anyone and was unaware of any messages sent from it. His account aligned with the evidence gathered, leading investigators to conclude that he was not involved in the crime. He expressed his willingness to cooperate fully and may be called to testify in court, as the fatal setup was carried out using his digital identity without his knowledge. Both suspects were found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison at Arundel State Prison in Georgia. Janine, who was only 17 at the time, was tried as an adult because of the seriousness of the crime. If she doesn't face any disciplinary issues while in prison, she will be released when she is about 37 years old. The impact of the crime was severe. Ashley's son lost his mother. Custody of the child was awarded to his father, who had been involved in his son's life even after he and Ashley ended their relationship. Now, he has taken on full responsibility, working to create a stable and safe environment for his son amidst the profound loss. Daniel and Antonetta's two sons also experienced the loss of their mother. Since Daniel was not implicated in the crime, he retained custody of the children and continued to raise them on his own. Despite the trauma of losing Ashley and the emotional burden of knowing their mother would be in prison for decades, Daniel remained dedicated to his role as a father. Both families were deeply affected. One child lost his mother, while Daniel's two sons were also left without their mother. What began as a situation fueled by jealousy and betrayal ended in tragedy, incarceration, and lasting pain for those who were innocent in this situation. The young lives impacted will always feel the effects of a crime they did not commit and will never fully escape from it. On the evening of September 10, 2012, a small village in France was quiet, but something life-changing was about to unfold inside one home. Jacqueline Savage had lived in fear for nearly 50 years, trapped in a cycle of violence that seemed impossible to escape. That night, everything reached a breaking point. Her husband, Norbert Moreau, was sitting on the terrace, drinking whiskey as he had all day. Moments before, the house had been filled with his shouting, threats, and the sound of another strike. Jacqueline had experienced this too many times before, but this time was different. Instead of waiting for the chaos to end, she walked to the cabinet, retrieved a hunting rifle, and loaded it. She stepped onto the terrace, took a deep breath, and did something she never thought she would. A gunshot echoed. How everything led up to this moment and what would unfold next was just beginning. Jacqueline Sauvage was born on December 27, 1947, in Montargis, France. Little is known about her early life, except that her mother was a victim of domestic violence. She grew up in a large family, with 5 brothers and 2 sisters. At just 16, Jacqueline met Norbert, a charming young man who was only a month older than her. His charm made him popular with women, but he chose Jacqueline. Their youthful romance quickly turned into a passionate love affair. Jacqueline's relationship changed dramatically when she became pregnant at 17. On June 5, 1965, she decided to marry Norbert, despite her mother's strong objections and her siblings' unanimous disapproval, who thought she was making a big mistake. Jacqueline was in love and, like many young women, dreamed of having a home and family. Their first daughter was born in 1966, followed by a second daughter while Norbert was away from home completing his military service. During this time, Jacqueline trained as a seamstress. 4 years later, they built their dream home in a beautiful village 80 kilometers south of Paris. The house, made of wood and stone, had a large garden and terrace, making it an ideal place to start a new chapter in their lives. It was here that they welcomed their 3rd and 4th children. As the years went by, Norbert's work life declined significantly. In 1981, he was let go due to professional misconduct. Struggling financially, he and Jacqueline started their own independent transport business. Jacqueline took care of the administration and deliveries. By 1989, their 2 children joined the family business, which had grown to include wine sales. Over the years, Jacqueline managed to secure her retirement benefits but continued to work. As their children became adults, they went their separate ways, except for only son, who remained single. By the time Jacqueline turned 65, she had 11 grandchildren. She still lived with Norbert in their home and was actively involved in a local hunting association. Though they seemed like a loving, close family on the outside, there was a troubling and tragic reality beneath the surface, one that would soon take the world by surprise. On the evening of September 10, 2012, around 7:30 p.m., Jacqueline took a hunting rifle from the cabinet. She went to the basement to fetch the cartridges and then went out onto the terrace where Norbert was sitting with a glass of whiskey. Without any hesitation, she attacked him 3 times in the back. Afterward, Jacqueline called emergency services calmly. By the time they arrived, Norbert was dead. The incident occurred the day after Jacqueline's son took his own life. Jacqueline claimed that Mr. Moreau had physically and abused his wife, daughter, and son. She stated that she acted out of fear for her own life and her children's safety. That morning, Norbert had made new threats, vowing to carry them out. Jacqueline claimed that the attacking was the end of 47 years of constant domestic abuse, which had not only ruined her life but had also left lasting wounds on their children. During her initial court appearance, Jacqueline described how she first recognized Norbert's true character, characterized by violent outbursts. The first time he hit her was after a dinner party at a friend's house, where she had received compliments about her appearance. Out of nowhere, he struck her hard across the face, leaving her shocked and speechless. As time went on, the physical violence, abuse, and verbal attacks became part of her everyday life. Their children were all affected, with her son bearing the brunt of his father's psychological cruelty. Norbert would belittle, humiliate, and break him down mentally. The daughters suffered even more. 2 of them were subjected to their father's abuse. Whenever Norbert lost his temper, he would lash out indiscriminately. The girls learned to stay silent, endure the pain, and hope it would end quickly. The violence started with slaps and gradually intensified to cruel insults, severe beatings, and acts of humiliation. At one point, he struck Jacqueline with a motorcycle helmet, leaving her with a permanent scar on her forehead. For nearly 50 years, Jacqueline lived in suffering. In her testimony, Jacqueline initially excused Norbert's behavior, attributing it to his tough childhood. She hoped they would eventually become a normal, loving family. But as time went on, the violence became commonplace, and fear of retaliation kept her silent. Their daughter, Fabienne, tried to break this silence. As a teenager, she ran away and reported to the police that her father had abused her. However, instead of taking action, the police officer merely warned Norbert. Fearing the repercussions, Fabienne felt compelled to withdraw her statement, leaving her father unpunished. This enraged him even more. Jacqueline, meanwhile, was terrified of what would happen to her and her children if she left, especially since she had no financial independence. All their bank accounts were in Norbert's name. She felt trapped and reflected, what would she have done with 4 children? She stayed to protect them. Jacqueline felt trapped in her situation. Norbert controlled not only their home but also isolated her from her family. Her parents and siblings had distanced themselves, refusing to intervene, and she had lost all her friends. The only people she interacted with were those in Norbert's tightly knit circle. There was a dark time when she considered ending her life. Most days, she just endured the abuse, waiting for it to stop. However, the night she killed Norbert was different. She noticed something unsettling in his eyes and a menacing tone in his voice that deeply scared her. In that moment, she could vividly imagine her children lying lifeless in front of her, same her son had been. On that day, he stormed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and threatened her, saying, "This time, he'll finish she off." Then he forcefully grabbed her, dragging her through the kitchen, into the hallway. He physically assaulted her and yelled that he would kill her children, whom he called the brats, and that he would also kill her. In that moment, something inside her broke. Earlier that day, they had argued about business. Norbert had started drinking around 11 a.m. and became increasingly irritable as the day went on. At one point, Jacqueline had locked herself in the bedroom to rest, taking some sedatives. By 7:30 p.m., he burst into the room, slapped her hard across the face, and insulted her, calling her lazy and demanding that she prepare dinner. After that, he poured himself another drink. He sat outside on the terrace, vowing to eliminate them all. Jacqueline remembered standing there, tasting the blood from her lip after his latest attack. She closed her eyes and pulled the trigger. The preliminary investigation revealed an injury on her lip, but no other significant signs of violence on her body. No sedatives were found in her system. Her trial occurred nearly 2 years later, on October 23, 2014, and gained national attention, sparking discussions about domestic violence and self-defense laws in France. In court, Jacqueline pleaded not guilty, and her defense claimed she acted to protect herself. She detailed years of brutal beatings, humiliation, and abuse from her husband. The judge persistently questioned her about why she never reported the abuse to the authorities. Jacqueline explained that she remained silent to survive. She understood that revealing the truth would lead to unbearable consequences. She shared her feelings of fear, shame, and the constant control Norbert had over her life. She recalled how she had often waited for his angry outbursts to subside, for her injuries to heal, and for the day she could finally escape. Finally, her son's death became unbearable for her. Journalists at the trial noted that she seemed distant and withdrawn, often going silent when the court questioned her. Jacqueline stated that they feared Norbert, and despite some complaints from his victims, nothing ever changed. Her 3 daughters also testified in court. The youngest, who experienced both physical and emotional abuse since she was 16, described her father as a monster. They all confirmed that Norbert had a volatile relationship with their brother, often resulting in physical fights. Their testimonies were crucial in revealing the ongoing cycle of abuse in their family and the desperation that led their mother to take action. Neighbors who testified described Norbert as a violent and intimidating individual. One woman candidly expressed her relief at his death, stating that Jacqueline had done them all a favor. A longtime friend of the couple characterized Norbert as impulsive and aggressive, frequently erupting in anger. After a challenging 5-day trial, Jacqueline's lawyers, who specialize in domestic abuse cases, argued for a broad interpretation of self-defense. They sought her complete exoneration, highlighting that she had suffered psychological and physical abuse for long time. They argued that she was well aware of Norbert's capacity to follow through on his threats. In contrast, the prosecution maintained that this was not a genuine case of self-defense, pointing out that Norbert had been shot in the back and that several minutes had elapsed since his last attack. They sought a 14-year prison sentence. On October 28, 2014, Jacqueline was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The judges criticized her for not showing remorse, arguing that she portrayed herself as a victim instead of expressing regret. They referenced French law, which states that self-defense must be an immediate and proportional response to an unjust attack. The verdict led to widespread outrage throughout France, with thousands protesting in support of Jacqueline. Demonstrators condemned the court for not understanding the realities of domestic violence and coercive control. Following the trial, Jacqueline unintentionally became a symbol in the fight against gender-based violence. Her case sparked a national discussion about the prolonged suffering of victims in abusive relationships. A support committee was quickly established, gaining backing from the mayor of Paris, environmental activists, and left-wing politicians. Some women held a dramatic protest outside the prison where Jacqueline was incarcerated, they wearing flower crowns while they began symbolically digging a tunnel, as if trying to free her. Jacqueline's lawyers worked hard to secure her early release. The strong public support greatly encouraged her. Despite suffering from bronchitis and chronic back pain, she was touched to see the first protest in her honor. In August 2015, a local court in Melun denied her request for parole, claiming she had not expressed enough remorse. However, due to continued public pressure, a second hearing was held on December 3, 2015. Her daughters campaigned vigorously for her freedom, emphasizing that she had endured a lifetime of mistreatment and did not deserve to spend her final years in prison. Nonetheless, the Paris Court of Appeals upheld the original sentence. Their only remaining option was to seek a reduction of her sentence. Public outrage over Jacqueline's conviction was so strong that it caught the president's attention. On December 22, 2016, Jacqueline's daughters arranged a meeting with the then president to ask for his help in securing a pardon for their mother. Just 2 days later, he granted a partial pardon using a rarely invoked constitutional power. He urged the courts to impose the minimum sentence possible, which resulted in a reduction of her prison term by 2 years and 4 months. A petition launched on Change to ask the French president to pardon Ms. Savage gathered 435,971 signatures. On February 26, 2017, a French television program called September à Huit received an extremely high viewership of 5 million people due to a segment describing Jacqueline Savage. In addition, politicians spoke out in support of Ms. Savage, forming a support committee, including Anne Hidalgo and Jean-Luc Mélenchon. After the presidential pardon was announced, a major debate broke out among lawyers and criminal law experts about whether the rule of law was respected. Their view was that the media had overturned 2 consecutive court decisions by influencing the public, who then pushed for the presidential pardon. Jacqueline's newfound freedom lasted exactly 4 years. She passed away in her home on July 23, 2020, at the age of 72, after being diagnosed with a terminal illness. To this day, she remains a significant figure in France's history, remembered as both a victim of extreme domestic abuse and a catalyst for change in the country's legal system. On a calm November morning in a close community in North Carolina, 13-year-old Hania Aguilar had taken her aunt's car keys that morning so she could start the car before school. That's when a witness saw a man dressed in black with a yellow scarf covering his face approach the girl and force her into a green 2003 Ford Expedition. Her terrified scream filled the air as the vehicle drove off. This event sparked a heartbreaking mystery that disturbed the entire community. What happened to Hania? Hania Aguilar was born on March 21, 2005, in the United States to Miguel and Celsa, who are both immigrants from Guatemala seeking a better life. Hania was remembered by family and friends as a cheerful, loving, and kind-hearted girl with big dreams. She was outgoing, dedicated as a daughter, sister, and friend. She leaving a positive impact on those around her with her friendly demeanor, engaging conversations. From a young age, she had a deep passion for music, often filling her home with the sounds of her violin. In 2018, Hania's family was living comfortably in Rosewood Mobile Home Park in Lumberton, North Carolina, a neighborhood mainly populated by Hispanic immigrants. Hania, 13, was an outstanding 8th grade student at Lumberton Middle School. However, on the morning of November 5, 2018, their peaceful life was disrupted. Around 7 a.m., while Hania was warming up the family vehicle outside their home, a stranger approached her from behind. He grabbed her and pushed her into the vehicle. A nearby neighbor heard screams and saw a man dressed in black with a yellow bandana forcing Hania into the green SUV, which quickly drove away. Hania's younger sister, who was outside at the time, witnessed the horrific event. Authorities were notified right away, and by 10 a.m., an Amber Alert was issued for Hania. She is a 13-year-old Hispanic girl, about 125 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. On the day she was taken, she was wearing a blue floral shirt, blue jeans. The Lumberton police, assisted by local and federal agencies, began a thorough search. Helicopters flew over the Rosewood area, and police officers stopped cars entering the region, asking drivers for any information. During a press conference, the police chief announced that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had shared Hania's details with authorities in Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina. Investigators indicated there was no evidence that Hania was acquainted with her abductor. Her family was fully cooperative throughout the investigation. The community, friends, and neighbors joined law enforcement in the search, showing their support, concern. On November 6th, Celsa made an emotional appeal through the FBI, expressing her profound love for her daughter and her desire for her safe return. She forgave those responsible and said her only wish was to reunite with her daughter. The case swiftly attracted national attention. The FBI, working with the governor's office, announced a $20,000 reward for any information that could help locate Hania. On the same day, a surveillance video was released showing the stolen green 2003 Ford Expedition shortly after the abduction. Authorities encouraged anyone with home surveillance footage that might be helpful to come forward. The vehicle had peeling paint on the hood, a sticker on the rear window, and North Carolina license plates. The next day, the Ford Expedition was discovered abandoned in a wooded area about 3 miles from Hania's home. Evidence from the vehicle was sent to the FBI laboratory in Virginia for analysis. Later that day, the FBI released a disturbing video showing a man walking purposefully through the area, as if stalking his target. This footage unsettled viewers, disclosing the calculated nature of the abduction. Notably, he was the only person seen in the area at the time of the abduction. This crucial footage aimed to identify the man and assess his possible involvement in the case. Authorities urged the public to assist in identifying the suspect. The investigation intensified as the community remained hopeful for Hania's safe return. As the search became more urgent, investigators turned their attention to a new lead. They believed that the girl's unique white Adidas sneakers, which had colorful stitching on the heel, could be key to finding her. Authorities speculated that the captor might have discarded the sneakers and urged the community to report any related discoveries. The FBI emphasized the need for public vigilance, reminding everyone that even the smallest detail could be important. They carefully analyzed the evidence and used media outreach to request assistance. The search for Hania was highlighted on the FBI's website as the most wanted case of the week. A Spanish-language podcast was released to ask for tips. Additionally, authorities directly appealed to hunters in Robeson County, asking them to check any surveillance footage for signs of the green SUV to figure out when and how it had been left behind. By Thanksgiving, the investigation had generated over 800 leads, interviewed more than 400 people, and analyzed extensive surveillance footage. However, the holiday was incredibly painful for Hania's family, filled with a profound emptiness. Friends and neighbors described the day as excruciatingly sad. The loss of Hania's laughter felt deeply. The community united, offering prayers and finding comfort in their collective hope that she could sense their love, no matter where she was. On November 27, 23 days after her disappearance, the investigation took a tragic turn. Authorities found a body at 4:45 p.m. in a shallow pond, located 10 miles from the abduction site. The body was face down, unclothed, covered by a folding table, with branches and leaves in the hair. Due to advanced decomposition, immediate identification was not possible, but dental records confirmed the identity later. This discovery shattered any remaining hopes of finding Hania alive and deeply affected her family. Neighbors gathered outside their home to provide support and prayers. Lumberton's police chief confirmed the tragic news. He was visibly upset and expressed deep sympathy for Hania's family. The medical examiner later determined that her death was caused by homicide, likely due to asphyxiation from pressure on her throat. There were also indications of abuse violence, but the extent of decomposition made some findings unclear. Authorities, along with the FBI, pledged to keep seeking justice, reassuring the public that they would not stop until those responsible for this terrible crime were brought to justice. The news of Hania's death shocked the community, especially among Hispanic residents, who united to seek justice for her. About 10 days later, authorities made an important discovery. Michael Ray McClellan, a 34-year-old man with a history of abuse offenses, was arrested while on parole at the time of the abduction. Investigators found DNA evidence from an unsolved 2016 abuse assault case that connected Michael to Hania. His arrest provided some sense of closure, but the sorrow over Hania's loss continued to weigh heavily on everyone who knew and loved her. On December 8, Michael went before a state magistrate at the Robeson County Detention Center and was formally charged with multiple crimes related to Hania. He was denied bail and faced a total of 10 charges, which included first-degree murder, first-degree abuse, abuse offenses against a minor under 15, first-degree abuse assault, statutory sexual offense with a minor, first-degree kidnapping, aggravated assault, felony restraint, child abduction, and concealing a body. The prosecution indicated that more charges might be added following the final toxicology and autopsy reports. Investigators believed Michael's actions were driven by racial prejudice and stereotypes, particularly against Hispanic communities, based on a false belief that these communities were vulnerable and involved in banned substance or money. Evidence showed that he intentionally targeted victims in places like the mobile home park where Hania lived. As the legal proceedings continued, Hania's funeral took place, drawing over 1,000 attendees, many of whom wore her favorite color, purple. The ceremony included balloons, flowers, and heartfelt speeches from family and friends. During the funeral, Celsa shared her last moments with her daughter. She spoke of her daughter as someone whose life was tragically cut short, but whose joy could never be taken away. With tears in her eyes, she promised to remain strong and support other families facing similar losses. She also thanked the authorities for their efforts to bring her daughter home. During the service, photos of Hania were displayed. Her friends read heartfelt letters and played her favorite song, "A Thousand Years." Her white coffin, with her name in gold letters, was carried by a horse-drawn carriage to a cemetery in Lumberton. After the funeral, the case attracted controversy when District Attorney Johnson Britt revealed that the sheriff's office had DNA evidence that McClellan could be a suspect in the 2016 abuse, but investigators never followed up. According to Britt, an email with that information was sent to the sheriff's office in 2017, copied from the district attorney's office. At the time, Britt said that information should have given the sheriff's office probable cause to obtain a search warrant, take a DNA sample from McClellan, and compare it to the 2016 abuse kit. 3 weeks before Hania disappeared, the Fairmont Police Department issued an arrest warrant for Michael. He was charged with theft and unlawful restraint related to a failed car robbery. However, this warrant was not acted upon until November 13th, which was 8 days after Hania's abduction. Additionally, on October 17th, the State Parole and Post-Release Supervision Commission issued another arrest warrant for parole violations, but no action has been taken regarding this matter. At a press conference, the prosecutor criticized the sheriff's office for mishandling evidence. He argued that the information received in 2017 should have led officers to collect DNA samples from Michael much sooner. After an internal investigation into these mistakes, the Robeson County Sheriff's Office apologized to Hania's family on January 18, 2019. They announced the firing of an investigator and noted that a senior officer with over 34 years of experience, who had been suspended, decided to resign. Police department leaders expressed their anger over the situation, highlighting that issues like improper report handling, inadequate investigations, and poorly conducted interviews indicated a systemic problem. They found these failures very concerning and called for major reforms. In the following years, the family's hope for justice diminished due to ongoing legal delays. The global issues worsened the situation. Hania's mother expressed her frustration from the justice system. During a pre-trial hearing, she urged the judge to expedite the case, claiming that the system had failed her family. On the other hand, Michael's defense argued that the global issues significantly restricted their ability to meet with him. They also had to manage 2 other unrelated felony cases involving Michael, further contributing to the delays. The Superior Court judge informed CELSA that it might take up to 5 additional years after the global issues for such a complex case to reach trial, emphasizing the importance of thoroughness to avoid mistakes that could lead to a retrial. Michael's trial underwent multiple delays and was finally rescheduled for early 2024. During this period, the community kept Hania's memory alive by commemorating her on her birthday, the anniversary of her passing, and other special occasions. Family and friends arranged events to honor her. Neighbors and former classmates remembered her as a beautiful young girl whose life ended too soon, someone who should have enjoyed a long and happy life. On the 2nd anniversary of her passing, CELSA shared that, as a mother, she could no longer look forward to Thanksgiving or Christmas. Her grief had overwhelmed her. These once joyful holidays had turned into painful reminders of her loss, making them hard for her to bear. Michael McClellan was finally brought to trial at the Robeson County Courthouse in North Carolina, where the prosecution aimed for the death penalty. They argued that the severity of his crimes warranted this ultimate punishment. During his transfer to court, Michael made a daring attempt to escape by using a homemade handcuff key. This attempt failed as officers quickly restrained him, but he tried again just hours later, showing his desperation to evade justice. The Robeson County Sheriff suggested that Michael had hidden the makeshift key under his tongue, but it became stuck in the handcuffs during his second attempt. As a result, security measures were significantly increased for the rest of the trial. In court, Michael pleaded guilty to all the charges against him. Confronted by Hania's grieving mother, he gave a brief and disturbing confession. He admitted to kidnapping Hania from her driveway, assaulting her, killing her, and disposing of her body. He also revealed details about earlier attacks in 2016 and 2018, highlighting his pattern of violent behavior. These admissions had a significant impact on his sentencing. The court sentenced Michael to life in prison without the chance of parole. Hania's mother felt both relief and sadness following the sentencing. She expressed gratitude to the authorities and the community for their strong support during the long and difficult process. Although no punishment could reverse the tragedy, she mentioned that the sentence provided her family with a sense of justice and closure. The FBI special agent who led the investigation also felt satisfied with the verdict, hoping it would bring comfort to Hania's family and other victims impacted by Michael's crimes. However, what seemed to be the end of a painful chapter took a surprising turn. While Michael was being transferred to the North Carolina Central Prison in Raleigh, he attempted to escape again. He struck the latch of a guard's firearm holster, causing the weapon to become loose. Michael briefly grabbed the gun, but the transport vehicle's driver reacted quickly, slamming on the brakes and allowing another officer to take the weapon away from him. After a brief struggle, officers used pepper spray to subdue him. Michael then surrendered and was placed in a high-security cell, with authorities considering adding more charges to his already lengthy criminal record. Despite his persistent attempts to avoid justice, Michael is set to spend the rest of his life in prison. The case had a lasting effect on the Hispanic community in North Carolina, increasing their fears and mistrust of local authorities. community members pointed out the failures of law enforcement in the early investigation and demanded reforms to prevent similar negligence in the future. Shannon Graves was born on November 4, 1988, in Ohio, USA. She was raised by her mother, a single mother. Everything changed when her mother met Ronnie DePaul, who became a father figure in her life. Ronnie treats her like his own daughter, and she quickly takes a liking to him. She was known for her kind heart and loving nature. In 2016, Shannon proudly earned her cosmetology license, marking a new beginning after a challenging childhood. Her friends affectionately called her Star, recognizing her free spirit, honesty, and selflessness. However, Shannon's compassionate nature sometimes led her to make poor choices in relationships. Following her mother's death, she struggled with substance abuse. Her close friends observed that she often fell for the wrong men, whether due to bad luck or her attraction to rebellious personalities. Despite these challenges, Shannon was determined to take control of her life. Her professional achievements filled her with hope for a brighter future. Unfortunately, Shannon's intuition was wrong when she became involved with Arturo Novoa. He is of Puerto Rican descent, charming and passionate about music, but he is also very secretive about his life. This secrecy likely stemmed from his lengthy criminal history, which began in 2004 with arrests for assault and property damage. A few months later, he faced charges of escaping from prison and obstructing public service. In 2006, he was charged with felony fleeing after a police chase, followed by aggravated arson charges. After serving his prison term, he was arrested again for trespassing in 2008 after being evicted from his residence. In 2010, he faced additional charges related to weapons and unlawful entry. Court records indicate that he was a man addicted to criminal activity and made a living by illegal means. When Shannon and Arturo began dating in the summer of 2016, everything seemed to be going well. She introduced him to her family and started spending more time at his home. That same year, she got a puppy, which brought her joy and companionship. During the holiday season, she celebrated with her family, enjoying food, laughter, and gift exchanges. This gathering would unknowingly be the last time the family would be together. 2 months later, while with Arturo, Shannon briefly encountered her sister, Debbie DePaul. They discussed Debbie's upcoming birthday in March, for which Shannon was already making plans. However, when the day came, she did not attend, an unusual absence. Initially, her family thought she was just busy and would arrive later, but she never came. Alarmingly, she did not call or send a message, not even to wish Debbie a happy birthday. When she also missed the Easter gathering the following month, concern grew. As time passed, her family's anxiety increased. After calling and texting several times without receiving a response, Ronnie attempted to contact Arturo. He claimed that he and Shannon had broken up and that she had moved to Cleveland with someone else. However, when Ronnie and Debbie tried to contact her directly, they were unsuccessful. Determined to find her, they went to her apartment, but found no clues. Her car and phone were there, but her beloved dog was missing. Around this time, Arturo was arrested on charges related to banned substances. In the following weeks, Shannon's family was engulfed in fear and uncertainty. In June, Debbie officially reported her as a missing person to the police. In their report, family members acknowledged Shannon's past struggles with addiction but highlighted that she had never gone this long without contacting them. Authorities requested anyone with information to come forward while they searched hospitals and jails, but there was still no trace of Shannon. Investigators found tracking her whereabouts to be extremely challenging, especially since she had been missing for months. They filed a request for her phone records and began looking into her personal life, noting that she often spent long periods of time with her boyfriend, Arturo, before her disappearance. The police subsequently interviewed Arturo. He recounted the same story he had told Ronnie, adding complexity to the case. Without a clear timeline for Shannon's disappearance, they could not confirm Arturo's alibi. Additionally, there was no evidence of a new boyfriend with whom Shannon had supposedly moved in. As suspicions rose, detectives learned about an ex-boyfriend named John, and considering this lead, they decided to investigate him further. John, a business owner, had a criminal past involving trafficking of banned substances. His incarceration had led to his breakup with Shannon, as her friends remembered how distressed she was upon learning of his conviction. Complicating matters, John had been released from prison shortly before Shannon was reported missing. When police found and interviewed him, he claimed he hadn't seen her since February, when she mentioned getting back together with Arturo. His statement implied that her relationship with Arturo may not have been as perfect as it seemed. Still, John admitted that he had lingering feelings for her at the time of their last conversation. With two potential suspects but no clear evidence, police were having a hard time getting their case off the ground. When Shannon's phone records were finally released, investigators hoped to glean vital information. Unfortunately, these records only confirmed that she had gone to work as usual in late February before her phone was suddenly turned off. The number had since been reassigned to someone else, and around that same time, all activity on her credit cards also came to a halt. The investigators had no idea that the answer to the case was about to emerge, but in the most frightening way. On July 30th, a man from Youngstown called 911 to report a shocking discovery. He told the operator that he had found human remains inside black garbage bags, and most disturbingly, the head was missing. Upon receiving the signal, rescue workers notified the police, who quickly arrived at the home of the caller, Kenny Eschenbaugh, and his wife, Jill. While forensic experts investigated the remains, Kenny and Jill were brought in for questioning. According to their testimony, the freezer containing the body parts belonged to a friend. A week prior, this friend had asked Kenny and Jill to store it in their basement, claiming it was filled with meat he didn't want to spoil. On July 29th, Jill decided to cook spaghetti and meatballs for dinner and thought she could use some meat from the freezer, planning to replace it later. However, when she approached the freezer, she found it locked. Assuming their friend was just being eccentric, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. To her horror, instead of meat, she found bags filled with what turned out to be human remains. Feeling nauseated, she quickly shut the freezer and called for Kenny. Together, they cautiously opened one of the bags and discovered a human foot. Since Kenny and Jill's stories matched perfectly when questioned separately, they were quickly ruled out as suspects. Investigators then turned their attention to the friend who had left the freezer in their home, named Anthony Gonzalez. Kenny explained that he had met Anthony 4 years earlier through a mutual friend, bonding over their shared interest in music. Although they hung out occasionally, Kenny found Anthony to be unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. Despite being cooperative, the identity of the victim remained a mystery until forensic experts discovered a scorpion tattoo on one of the feet, matching a tattoo belonging to Shannon, a woman who had recently disappeared. While more tests were planned, it increasingly appeared that the remains belonged to her. This left investigators with a concerning question: how and when was Shannon placed in the freezer? Shortly afterward, the lead prosecutor in Ohio held a press conference to discuss this chilling case, which was rapidly becoming one of the most disturbing in recent history. Although the medical examiner couldn't determine the cause of death without the victim's head, Shannon was positively identified through fingerprint analysis. Her family was heartbroken to learn the truth about their beloved daughter, discovering that her fate was far worse than they had ever imagined. Shannon's family and friends gathered in a local park for a candlelight vigil to remember her. Debbie, one of the attendees, told reporters that she believed Shannon has found peace. The vigil was intended to celebrate Shannon's life rather than to focus on sadness. Many people lit candles and released lanterns while wearing shirts with messages honoring Shannon. However, Shannon's family was visibly pained. Ronnie, too devastated to appear on camera, shared his indescribable grief, explaining that he loved Shannon as a daughter and sought justice for her. In the meantime, investigators ramped up the search for Anthony. They soon discovered that Anthony Gonzalez was just an alias. His real name matched the identity of someone they had already suspected, Arturo Novoa. Authorities learned that Arturo had been dating a woman named Katrina Layton, who moved into his house shortly after Shannon was last seen. Given Arturo's lengthy criminal history, the police acted quickly, arresting both him and Katrina and searching their home. The police found red stains on the walls, a knife, and a manual for the freezer where Shannon's remains were located. Kenny, who previously believed his friend's name was Anthony, was shocked to learn Arturo's true identity. He wasn't the only one confused. Arturo often used different names, possibly to conceal his past involving activities related to banned substances. During questioning, Arturo remained composed, repeatedly denying any connection to Shannon's death and claiming ignorance about her whereabouts. He also distanced himself from the freezer. Katrina supported his claims, but their story began to unravel when police discovered a key among her belongings that fit the freezer's lock, linking them to the crime and ensuring they remained in custody. As the investigation continued, Shannon's ex-boyfriend John played a crucial role in uncovering additional information. He spoke to Shannon's friends and learned about a bonfire attended by Arturo. A witness reported that Arturo used the fire to burn personal items and, when questioned, he claimed they were Shannon's clothes, which he burned as revenge for alleged infidelity. That night, he was with his friend Andrew Herman, and they both continued to burn clothing. Investigators later searched the bonfire site and found remnants, including a bracelet that belonged to Shannon. As the investigation progressed, authorities contacted a woman named Jamie, who knew Andrew and his wife, Michelle Eilenfeld. Jamie reveals that Arturo and Katrina were behind Shannon's murder, while Andrew helped handling the body of her body. Jamie stated that Katrina had harbored jealousy towards Shannon for a long time, and that Shannon felt the same way about her. The situation became more complicated when neighbors reported seeing Katrina walking Shannon's dog and using her credit card to make small purchases, suggesting that Katrina had taken over a part of her life. Amid these incidents, Ronnie passed away unexpectedly without witnessing justice. Debbie, overwhelmed with sorrow, sought therapy while caring for her younger brother and Shannon's cherished dog. Meanwhile, Andrew and Michelle were placed in pretrial detention. Authorities gathered a wealth of evidence that Michelle had threatened witnesses, interfered with the investigation, and covered up the crime. As the case went to the jury, the truth of what happened became clearer. On February 24, 2017, Arturo killed Shannon, likely with Katrina present. He later called Andrew to assist him in handling the body. They disposed of her head, stored other body parts in their freezer, and discarded some remains in an undisclosed location that authorities have yet to find. The prosecutor stated that Arturo was merely a small-time dealer of banned substances, acting out of jealousy over Shannon's finances. Katrina, on the other hand, wanted Shannon to keep her distance so she could pursue a relationship with Arturo. Facing the death penalty, the four defendants ultimately accepted plea deals. Arturo Novoa received a life sentence for murdering Shannon. Katrina Layton was sentenced to 18 years, Andrew Herman to 12 years, and Michelle Eilenfeld to 2 years. Arturo attempted to appeal his sentence, but it was upheld. To keep the memory of Shannon alive, Debbie created a social media page dedicated to her younger sister, where she frequently shares pictures of her pet dog. She frequently visits Shannon's grave, where she has established a special ritual. After cutting the grass, Debbie spray paints a large pink heart next to the headstone, which was Shannon's favorite color. In a local interview a few years later, Debbie recalled the devastating call she received about the partial discovery of Shannon's remains. Currently, the investigators who helped convict Arturo are still searching for the missing parts of Shannon's remains. Debbie remains hopeful that they will be found someday as she continues to honor her sister's memory through her dedicated online tribute. It was a cold, quiet night, but something frightening was about to unfold in the woods near Altrincham. A car stopped on the deserted road. The driver, a 19-year-old, got out and looked around nervously. In the passenger seat was Alex Rada, only 15 years old and unaware that this night would change his life forever. What began as a secret between them had grown into something dangerous. Trust had been broken, emotions were running high, soon everything would take a deadly turn. But what really happened that night? The Rhoda family enjoyed a quiet and happy life in a village in Cheshire, northeastern England. Their home was warm and welcoming, shared by Lisa, her husband Adam, and their first child, Adam Jr. For many years, they had hoped to grow their family. Nearly a decade later, their dream was realized in what Lisa called a miraculous event. On March 5, 2004, they welcomed their second son, Alex Rada. As Alex grew up, Lisa noticed he had interests that were different from many other children. He enjoyed playing with her makeup and handbags. When he turned 13, Alex bravely told his parents a personal truth: he was gay. Lisa and Adam had suspected this for a while and welcomed his disclosure with open arms, offering their full support. However, Adam was worried, not about Alex's identity, but about how society might react to him. Unfortunately, his concerns were valid. At school, Alex faced teasing from some classmates, especially from boys who had difficulty accepting those who didn't fit their expectations. Despite this, Alex remained confident. Unlike many of his peers, he never felt the need to hide who he was. At Holmes Chapel Comprehensive School, Alex formed a close group of friends, predominantly girls. They cared for him deeply and supported him completely. These friendships acted as a shield when he faced unkindness, helping him thrive without letting negativity affect him. Full of joy and confidence, Alex was known for his infectious laughter. A bright student, he was also very active on social media, where he enjoyed sharing snippets of his life, his singing, dancing, and laughter. One of his accounts had gained over 4,000 followers. He had a uniquely close relationship with his father, one that resembled friendship. By the time Alex turned 15, he had become quite popular, with his phone frequently buzzing with messages from friends and admirers. However, one message he received one evening particularly caught his attention. It was from Matthew Mason, an older boy known for his mysterious online presence. Something about it made Alex pause. Matthew was a 19-year-old from the neighboring town of Ollerton. He grew up in a wealthy and religious family, living on a large estate valued in the millions. Every Sunday, they attended church together. At school, Matthew was known for being composed. Like Alex, he graduated from Holmes Chapel Secondary and went on to study agricultural engineering. He was a member of the Young Farmers Organization and worked part-time as an apprentice mechanic. In his spare time, he enjoyed fishing with his father, with whom he had a strong bond. At that time, Matthew was also dating a girl named Caitlin Lancashire. In October 2019, Alex shared with Georgia, one of his closest friends, that he had been receiving messages from Matthew. Georgia was surprised because she had known Matthew from school and had never seen him show any interest in men or suggest that he was bisexual. The situation felt strange. Alex and Matthew were from completely different backgrounds. They had never associated with each other socially. Without social media, they might never have met. Georgia warned Alex to be cautious. However, as the messages kept coming, Alex began to feel excited. He added Matthew as a friend on a social media platform, and their conversations quickly became more frequent. For Alex, this felt like the start of something special, his first experience with love. He had never been in a relationship before, and it was exhilarating, as if he was entering a whole new world. Initially, Alex and Matthew's exchanges were light, casual, but over time, they grew flirtatious and more intimate. Matthew complimented Alex's looks. Soon they began sharing photos. One night, after drinking too much at a bar, Matthew made a poor choice. He sent Alex an explicit photo of himself. Alex's friends noted that he often didn't understand the seriousness of situations, seeing them as jokes. Because of this, he viewed Matthew's message as part of a playful flirtation. Things became more serious when Matthew sent a video of a compromising nature. As their online relationship grew, Matthew proposed they meet in person and offered to pick Alex up, but Alex declined, saying his father wouldn't allow it. Despite this, they continued to exchange hundreds of messages. Wanting to know more about Matthew, Alex looked into his social media accounts, only to discover that Matthew was already in a relationship. This revelation filled Alex with frustration and doubt, making him question everything between them. Determined to find out the truth, Alex messaged Matthew's girlfriend, Caitlin, the girl he had seen in several of Matthew's posts. On November 3rd, Alex asked Caitlin if she was dating Matthew. When she confirmed it, Alex revealed that he had been secretly involved with Matthew for the past 2 to 3 weeks. Caitlin was stunned. Alex shared details of their explicit conversations and explained that he only learned about Matthew's relationship after investigating him online. According to media reports, jealousy was a significant factor in Alex's actions. An hour after speaking with Caitlin, Alex confronted Matthew, informing him that he had told Caitlin the truth. Alex's frustration was evident as he accused Matthew of being deceptive, both to Caitlin and to him. He insisted that Matthew needed to be honest because Caitlin deserved it after 2 years together. But Alex had already made the decision to reveal the truth himself. Matthew, who came from a strict religious background, was extremely afraid of his secrets getting out by Alex. In a panic, he denied any accusations to Caitlin and called Alex a liar. This marked a troubling change in the relationship between Alex and Matthew. Feeling trapped, Alex threatened to leak an explicit photo he had of Matthew. Reports indicate that later that same day, Matthew made Alex a beneficiary on his bank account and transferred over £50 to him. By this point, Caitlin had already ended her relationship with Matthew. Despite their issues, on November 9th, Alex and Matthew met in person for the first time and became physically involved. Their secret relationship continued over the next 2 weeks. While everything seemed fine to outsiders, the payments to Alex didn't cease. Matthew was not ready for the truth to surface, but everything came to a head on December 12, 2019. After weeks of threats and pressure, Matthew lost control. On that cold, rainy night, he picked Alex up from his home and drove him to a remote forested area near Altrincham, claiming they were going to have another intimate encounter. However, once they arrived, Matthew violently attacked Alex with a wrench he had brought along. After committing this brutal act, Matthew drove to a friend's farm, hoping to destroy any evidence linking him to the crime. To create an alibi, he then casually went to 2 different bars, meeting friends for drinks as if nothing had happened. At one bar, he took a selfie and shared it on social media, further emphasizing his facade of a typical night out. Later, he even took a picture of himself smiling in bed, with his bare torso showing, which he sent to Caitlin to strengthen his alibi. In the middle of the night, he discovered Alex's phone on the passenger seat of his car. Aware of the damaging information it contained, he quickly disposed of it. As the night went on, Matthew returned to the forest. He attempted to move Alex's lifeless body to the roadside and tried to lift him into his Renault Clio. However, after several unsuccessful attempts, he abandoned the body there and walked away. Alex's parents were becoming more and more worried about his disappearance. After they were unable to contact him, they reported him as missing. Soon, the police, friends, and family were all frantically searching for him. A police officer from Cheshire texted Matthew, asking him to reach out regarding Alex's disappearance. By morning, the stark reality emerged. Garbage collectors stumbled upon Alex's severely disfigured body, found half-naked and bearing multiple wounds. When law enforcement arrived at the forest crime scene, they discovered that Alex had endured at least 15 blows to the head in what officials labeled a brutal and ruthless attack. A witness had unknowingly implicated him the night before. A photo of a vehicle parked by the roadside was taken, and when the police traced it, they linked it to Matthew. On November 13th, just before noon, officers arrested him on a highway nearby. Despite his efforts to remove the evidence, dried blood was still evident on his car. A search of his car's trunk revealed a garbage bag filled with incriminating items, a blood-stained green sweater, the wrench used in Alex's attack, and a large padded jacket that belonged to Alex. With compelling evidence against him, Matthew was taken into custody and formally charged with the crime. Investigators traced the unfortunate path of Alex and Matthew's relationship, which began with curiosity but ended in horrific violence. Their online interactions often focused on money, culminating in a crucial conversation moments before Alex's violent death. Records indicate that after an initial payment, Matthew had sent Alex a total of £1,270, supposedly for their meetings and to guarantee his silence. The final payment of £100 was sent just 5 days before the murder. As the investigation continued, unsettling new information came to light. Matthew's internet search history revealed his disturbing mindset. He had looked up methods to kill someone. His searches included queries like what happens if you push someone down the stairs, as well as information on poisons and unsolved missing person cases in Cheshire. One of Alex's friends mentioned that when Matthew first contacted Alex to set up their last meeting, Alex was excited. However, after a second phone call, he started to feel uneasy. Alex even texted his friend, questioning whether it was odd that the meeting was in a secret, special location. By that time, Alex sensed that something was wrong. Despite his concerns, he ultimately decided to go, likely because he needed the money. Moments after entering Matthew's car, Alex shared one final image on his social media story. It was a simple photo of the car's interior with a small heart emoji at the bottom. This was the last message Alex ever posted. His closest friends, who often discussed his new relationship with him, grew increasingly concerned over time, particularly because he kept asking for more money. At one point, Matthew told Alex that he was having financial difficulties and could no longer send Alex money. However, shortly after that, he transferred nearly £700 to Alex. Alex's friends, whose names are kept confidential for legal reasons, later informed the police that they were aware of the wrongdoing and had expressed their concerns to Matthew. Despite their advice, Alex decided to continue with his actions. The trial started on January 25, 2021, at Chester Crown Court. The jury learned that the two individuals had only known each other for a few months but had been involved in a secret and illegal relationship during that period. Under English law, a relationship between a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old is considered unlawful because the age of consent is 16. This means that any intimate activity involving someone under 16 is strictly prohibited, regardless of their willingness. During his testimony in court, Matthew acknowledged hitting Alex with a wrench but sought to explain his actions by saying he lost control due to being blackmailed by Alex. He described their initial interactions, which began in October 2019 with casual conversations. Over time, however, Alex reportedly started sending late-night messages that included personal and suggestive inquiries, such as whether Matthew was clothed. He also claimed that Alex had attempted to attack him prior to his death. Matthew mentioned that he was struggling financially and had lost friends, family as a result of the situation. Although he did not clearly specify what the payments were for, he insisted that he was under immense pressure. Furthermore, he expressed feelings of shame and discomfort after becoming intimate with Alex. At one point, Matthew recognized that his actions were wrong, not only because Alex was male but also due to his age. During the trial, prosecutors shared all the details of Alex's conversations with Caitlin, who was Matthew's girlfriend at the time. One of the detectives strongly disagreed with Matthew's assertion that the murder was spontaneous. The detective argued instead that Matthew had carefully planned the attack and had tricked Alex into going to a secluded place, thinking that no one would discover his intentions. During the victim impact statements, Alex's parents, Adam and Lisa, honored their son with heartfelt words, describing him as a beautiful and loving child. Through tears, Lisa shared that losing a child in such a horrific way felt like living in hell. She highlighted that Alex was raised in a loving environment, not a fearful one, and he was always proud of himself, never needing to hide or pretend. Lisa condemned Matthew's actions, noting that despite his early admission of guilt, Matthew put their family through additional trauma in a selfish effort to lessen his sentence. She expressed that he didn't consider the immense pain he caused both families. Lisa described Matthew as the most selfish and calculating person she had ever met, criticizing his attempts to blame Alex and tarnish his reputation. During the trial, Adam reflected on his son as a cheerful and respectful young man who always considered other people's feelings. He acknowledged that he could never fully recover from the loss and that their lives would be forever changed. After a month-long trial and over 9 hours of jury deliberation, the jury rejected Matthew's account of the events and found him guilty by a majority vote of 10-2. As he sat in the defendant's chair, crying, the judge announced his sentence. Because he used a weapon during the crime, the mandatory minimum sentence was set at 25 years. The judge characterized the murder as premeditated, indicating it was carefully planned and executed with no remorse. He noted that although Alex may have initiated contact, Matthew not only responded but also actively encouraged an intimate relationship. The judge emphasized that Matthew was significantly more experienced than Alex, who was still young and emotionally immature. Additionally, he stated that Matthew had intentionally created the situation. While this was not Matthew's first intimate experience, it was Alex's first. The judge concluded that Alex's naive demands were influenced by the intimate offenses committed by Matthew, so the responsibility for what happened did not lie with Alex. In deciding Matthew's sentence, the judge emphasized his total lack of empathy, his complete disregard for the victim and the victim's grieving family. As a result, in January 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 28 years before being eligible for parole. However, on June 2021, Matthew's legal team filed an appeal against this sentence. After considering both written and oral arguments, a panel of 3 appellate judges concluded that the original sentence was too long and reduced the minimum term from 28 years to 26 years. Matthew faced a deep internal conflict as he struggled to accept his own gender and feared rejection. This unresolved conflict caused him unimaginable pain and destruction. In his desperate attempt to avoid confronting his reality, he not only compromised his own future but also hurt someone who accepted him without shame or fear.